This week on the Frame Savers, I don't want to grow up. This is episode 63 of the Frame Savers, and if you're new to us, we are a retro video game podcast that focuses on speedrunning. Speedrunning is a hobby where we try and beat video games as quickly as possible, and retro means old. You can tie that together. We try and beat old games as quickly as possible. This is episode 63. We are still trying to get good at this. Eventually, we'll get there. We've actually done almost like 100 episodes coming up soon, if you count the pockets, and so we're working on it. We're going to be good one day. But
yeah, we're pretty close to 100 recordings, which is pretty awesome. I've been keeping tally, which is strange because it really messes with John's OCD. But like some of our early episodes weren't numbered, and the numbering was inconsistent a few times. Then when you mix in the pockets, it's kind of been interesting actually keeping track of how many legitimate recordings we've done. Our listener selected episode, I think, is coming up next, and that's episode 64, which will be our 100th episode 100th thing we've recorded,
and that'll be Star Tropics, which will be really awesome. So that'll be a fun time. Yeah, the early episodes when we did specials, we just called them specials, and it really bothers me because they don't have numbers on them. But now we count specials as episode numbers, and so yeah, it just. It's all a lie.
I've tried to help John by going back and numbering them as like episode 6.5, but it's really not fixing the problem for him. It keeps him up at night.
Yeah, I haven't slept in months. Before we dive into the games we're talking about this week, how you doing, Chad? What have you been up to?
Pretty good. I've been pretty busy with work, but I've been trying to get back into speedrunning with the A Link to the Past grind, so that's been a lot of fun. I have bopped you back.
You bopped me hard by like a minute.
Yeah, it's actually getting kind of big now, and I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to actually be good at that game. Me and John both kind of left it off on neither of us being particularly good. I'm trying to get better. John's picking it back up for the tournament. Everyone we know is going to be playing the game very soon, and we're going to finally crush the randomizer oligarchy that's been going on.
Yeah, we're both at that awkward like puberty time. Like we're not quite men yet at the game, but we're not children anymore either. It's like we still got to get like better strats and really like just polish certain rooms and stuff. And so it's going to be a lot of work. I've got to do a whole like relearn of the whole game, so I'm not looking forward to that. But it's been fun. I've been doing. I kind of set a bunch of speedrunning goals for 2018. So I've been doing a lot of Mega Man 2 Game Boy because I want to. Kind of unfinished business with certain games that I want to go back to, and I want to get second place in that. Also been doing some Link to the Past races with Auth and some runs, and also some Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, we got to get back on that grind. We got to be playing the game. We got to stay warm. Got to stay fresh.
Oh, and Final Fantasy Adventure. I've been doing a bunch of that. I actually have a bunch of speedrunning things I have done. This is not normal.
Yeah, you've actually had a hotter speedrunning moment than me. I've been kind of slacking off lately. I did a little bit of Mickey Safari and Letterland. That game's hot. That game is a hot.
Oh yeah, that was a fun thing to watch.
I'll probably try to find a way to talk about that on the podcast coming up.
That'd be great. I've also rewatched the first 6 seasons of Gilmore Girls, so I really need to get a new job again. That's really where we're at, I'm pretty sure, with things. But
every time you mention the Gilmore Girls on this podcast, I feel like we go backwards in legitimacy. I also just recently played through Celeste. That game was really good. I had a ton of fun. We did it as a blind race with a bunch of us. Tina Hacks was there. It was awesome.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of hot speed running, so check out our streams if you get a chance. But some cool events coming up as well if you're looking for your speed running fix. The SMB1 Warpless tournament, they just did their seeding, and it's starting soonish. I don't have the exact dates, but you can find it on twitch.tv/speedgaming. That'll be a really cool tournament to watch. The world record's like a very, very low 19-minute run, but all types of people are doing that. I know people that have PBs in the mid upper 20s, so it'll be a fun tournament. I assume it has a lot of entrants. Also, Kusa Grande 3 has started. That's the Bad Games tournament. That's a ton of fun to watch. Really, the first couple of matches just started, I think, this past week. So you can find that on twitch.tv/Brosentia. That's BROSSENTIA.
The new format for that's really cool, actually. He's setting it up as groups to start off with, and usually that just means for something like this, it would just be arbitrary games, but he has like game masters in charge of each group that are specifically organizing the games for him. for those segments. So it's actually really neat the way it's playing out. He's having the game master for each group help commentate the race. It's
Oh,
like
cool.
four-way races. It's been really fun.
Which is the
It's
person who picks the game as well, right?
yeah. So that
Yeah.
person has done a bunch of research about the game and is helping to commentate the race. So it's been really great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got to watch a race of the whichever Bart is the radioactive man one. I don't know the exact
Oh
words for
right.
it, but yeah. So it was fun to watch
You'd think as
Unikitten and
someone who
some
just
other
got
people.
done doing a Simpsons episode, we would know all about the Bart games, but as it turns out, we know two of
As
them
someone
now.
who paid like $20 for that game, you think I would know? No, but yeah, it's always fun to watch Cusagrande. It gives Chad terrible ideas for speed runs to do, and so you can kind of just see where his future's at as that unfolds. So I'd check that out. But this week we're talking about two pretty decent games, I think. Well, maybe that can be up for debate later. But we're talking about Aladdin and Hook. So why are we talking about Aladdin and Hook?
Well, we were pairing some games tailored toward children. I mean, let's be fair, they're all children's games, but we're pairing together some Disney games, and we finally decided, we really liked Hook as a speed game episode, and we really liked Aladdin. They both needed a little more to stand on. Probably could have gone the Disney route and just paired Aladdin with another Disney game, but we ended up going the, I guess, Robin Williams films route.
Yeah,
Um, what a strong tie for this podcast.
16-bit Robin Williams
Gone are the
film
days of
games.
Barbie Game Girl and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Here we
Yeah, now
are
we
with
have so much
actual
cohesion.
legitimate ties between games.
Yeah, Robin Williams was awesome, by the way. Sad that he passed, but in the '90s, he was cranking out a lot of great movies.
The
Mrs.
absolute
Doubtfire,
hotness.
just a seminal movie. I mean, I loved Mrs. Doubtfire. He's
Do you
he's
think
hilarious.
I do you think a Mrs. Doubtfire video game would have turned out well? I feel like the obvious answer is yes.
The obvious answer is yes, especially if it's a VR game. I think VR would be mandatory for that. Um, but yeah, Robin Williams. I mean, it's funny because his stand up was so like filthy, but like then he moved on to do like all these children's type movies, and Hook was a great movie. Aladdin. I think he stole the show as genie. So I miss Robin Williams movies. Those are sweet. But these games are both really good. I know you speedrun both of them. I've watched you speedrun both of them. They're really fun games, and I guess if you've watched them, they're similar games in a lot of ways. So,
Right.
um, yeah. So go ahead. We're gonna listen to some fresh music because these games do have great music, and then we're gonna talk about Aladdin.
So the first game that we want to talk about is Aladdin. So on November 25th in 1992, Disney released their 31st animated feature film, and it quickly became the most successful film of the year, earning more than 500 million worldwide. This movie actually is part of the big Disney Renaissance. People credit the rebirth of Disney. I think this was like the fourth movie in that series. These brand new movies that were coming out that were really putting Disney back on the map and getting them into households. So you had movies like Aladdin, Lion King,
Little Mermaid, probably,
a
or
lot of the other ones from that era.
yeah,
I mean, it's not like Disney hadn't been pumping out movies since the 30s. So
yeah.
in late 1993, Virgin Games USA developed a game for the Genesis titled Disney's Aladdin. So Virgin
Good
had
title, strong title.
it's unique. We probably don't know of any other games with that title. Virgin actually formed a connection with Disney Animation Studios, which was a first in the video game industry. A lot of the games that were being made at the time were sort of, you know, they were the animation for them was generated from animation cells, but they weren't necessarily developed by the studio themselves.
Hmm.
And so this was kind of a new thing. The game was actually praised for its use of traditional animation produced by Disney under the supervision of Virgin, using an in-house technique called Digicel, which was a process that was used to compress the animations onto the cartridge. So this is the Genesis version, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Genesis version gets so much praise. A lot of people credit the Genesis version as being their favorite one, and I think ultimately the answer is that comes down to region, just because the Genesis is Genesis,
Genesizes is.
yeah, ownership over Europe basically, and Nintendo's ownership over the
Is
U.S.
is that the same process that the Mickey games did that we talked about in a previous episode? Or,
I would
I mean, they're
imagine
both
that it's
really good
related.
animation, but
Was Mickey Mania, was that Virgin Studios as well, or was that a different group? I don't remember who made that one.
I don't know. As soon as we say words, I forget them immediately. So anything we've ever talked about on this podcast, I don't remember.
Yeah, I basically do the same. So, as far as gameplay is concerned, this game includes a lot of levels from the movie. So, it includes the Cave of Wonders, the Sultan's Dungeon, Jafar's Palace, the rooftops of Agrabah. And throughout the game, you can collect gems, and those gems can be used to purchase lives and continues between stages from a merchant. You can also collect throughout the stages Genie or Abu coins to unlock bonus rounds. So the Genie's bonus stages are luck-based games to get power-ups and items, and Abu's stages are basically skill-based bonus games. So you kind of move Abu back and forth to try to pick up the items you want and not get hit by the items you don't want. They're sort of falling down the screen. And in this game, Aladdin wields a sword, which is kind of unique. I mean, that doesn't really feel like that. It feels really unique because it doesn't feel like a staple element of the film. You know,
Yeah,
Aladdin running around with a sword doesn't really pass the taste test for me. And
sure.
it's unique to this game as well. It actually released to really high praise and fantastic sales. At one point, it was the third best-selling Genesis game
Oh
after
wow.
Sonic 1 and 2.
Yeah, this
Um,
is the only one I played as a kid was the Genesis version. At
did
a
you
friend's
play it
house,
on
I
the
played it a
Genesis?
bunch.
Because it was eventually
Yes.
ported to the NES, the PC, the Game Boy
Yeah,
Color.
no, I played it on the Genesis. One of my
Nice.
buddies had it. I did have to beat the Game Boy one for Game Boy Quest, which I already did, and so I've got a little bit of experience with this recently. Although it's not the same game, it's not the best port. I'll say that it's not the greatest experience of my life. Was not playing Aladdin on the Game Boy, but I do remember liking the game a decent bit when I was a kid playing it at a friend's house. But games at friends' houses always seemed better than the games you had. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you
Because
don't
like you
have
didn't,
those games.
yeah, you didn't like, you never got to see all the flaws in them, and you didn't, get tired of them. So like, I remember seeing Double Dragon as a kid, like at some family members' houses, and just thinking it was the greatest game ever because I didn't have it. But
I know what you mean. I
you know
used to
how it
go over
is.
to a friend's house to play Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, and so you're like, this is the best. There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with this game.
but
So
now I recognize it as
yeah, so this was ported to the NES, the PC, the Game Boy, and the Game Boy Color. And then a second game was planned using pre-rendered 3D sprites similar to Donkey Kong Country, but the project was canceled by Disney. So that's kind of interesting.
yeah. I can't
That'd be
really
weird.
envision
I
how that
don't
would
think that would
work.
look good. I can't
Yeah,
imagine that being good.
it's strange to me because while the movie did use some 3D animation, there was like the giant sand tiger head coming
Hmm.
out of like there was a lot of it was a lot of techniques that were really innovative at the time. These sort of mixing of traditional animation with 3D, but I just can't understand how anyone would really do a
Yeah, that
3D
sounds wrong.
Aladdin. I mean,
That
it
sounds
doesn't
wrong.
even really fit in all that well with the like two straight to VHS movies that came afterward, like
Yeah,
Return of Jafar and Prince of Thieves.
still canon, still lore.
That's true. So that same year, Capcom actually developed a version that was completely separate from the version that Virgin Games had made, and they made it for the SNES. It was also titled Disney's Aladdin. Very unique. Um,
It's a good
and the
name.
reason for that was that Capcom actually still had the Disney licensing rights for Nintendo consoles at the time of the film's release. Obviously, that licensing right wasn't held for too much longer because eventually the Genesis version was ported to the NES.
Hmm.
But they did have the license for it. And this released 10 days after the release of the Genesis version, and it similarly takes place throughout several stages in Agrabah, the Genie's Lamp, Jafar's Palace. And this is really your standard platformer as well. It's very fluid motion, very Capcom. You know, the animation's good, the controls are good, the music's good. Aladdin jumps on enemies throughout this game and throws apples to disorient enemies when they're hit. You can collect gems to gain extra hearts and refill your health. There are 10 red gems in every single level. And at the end of the game, the number of red gems that you've collected are tallied, and it tells you actually a completion percentage. So you actually get that on screen. It tells you what percentage of the game you completed based on how many red gems you got. There's a cloth that you could find in stages that allows Aladdin to float through the air. So if you just hold down the button, you float. And when you release the button, you can fall. And then there's also bonus games, much like in the Genesis version, though these are pretty much all the Genie's luck-based games. So if you
Mhm.
find these flying golden scarabs, you can collect them. And there's a bonus game where there's a wheel.
Oh, that's
And
what they do.
yeah, and whatever you land on, you get, like 3 lives, 5 lives, a heart,
Continue. You
yeah,
gotta
things like
continue.
that.
I was like, what are these scarabs doing? I thought they were invincibility for a bit, and I was like, no, they're not that. And then I tried to catch one. You can't catch them. Tried hard. I was like, I
Yeah,
don't know. I'll figure it out one day.
for sure.
Now I know.
Yeah,
This
so
game's better than the Genesis version, by the way, also.
really, you,
Yeah.
you you would be surprised how many people disagree with you. There
But
are
I haven't played the Genesis one in a long time. It's better than the Game Boy port of the Genesis one. I can say that.
Yeah,
But
I mean, if your opinion of it is formed by the Genesis version or by the Game Boy version, then that's
yeah,
probably
that's
not
not
fair.
fair.
I'd like
Yeah.
to one day just sit down and more or less casually play the SNES version and then casually play the Genesis version and really get a sense for which one I find more fun. Um, this
Some
game
quick.
was yeah, go
Oh,
for
go
it.
ahead. I was just gonna say some quick fire thoughts on Aladdin the movie before we move on.
All right,
Do you have any? I mean, I have a few. I was just
okay,
curious.
hit me
I
with
mean,
your.
Princess Jasmine, one of the top three hottest Disney
Oh,
princesses. I'm
without
gonna put that
without
out there.
question.
Possibly number one. I mean,
Probably number one. Wait, who's
she's.
number one? Who do you feel like is beating Princess Jasmine?
Well, I love Belle, and now that Emma Watson's
Oh,
been Belle,
oh,
it's almost impossible to like move my mind away from that concept.
nah.
Abu was really cute. I liked Abu quite a bit. Um, it's also really cool. Like this game does the cutscenes in between, which a lot of movies do, or a lot of these kind of games do. And I found them really charming. It was kind of, I don't know. I mean, we'll get into it in the ratings, but this game feels exactly like I would want an Aladdin video game to be after watching the movie. Like it just felt so much like exactly what I'd want as a kid interacting with the game and the movie and getting kind of the cutscenes and
There's
just
a
felt
part of me
perfect.
that really appreciates the Capcom version better because I feel like it's more what I desire a platformer to be. It's very left to right. It's very
Hmm.
progress through the stage and make progress. The Genesis version is, I don't want to use the word cluttered, but it's not just a direct linear progression from left to right.
Hmm.
It's a lot of backtracking and
Hmm.
climbing up and going left and climbing up some more and going right and back and forth and all that. I always find that kind of level design in a platformer really frustrating and annoying.
Hmm.
But Capcom, if you think about like a Mega Man X game or something like that, it's definitely got that same sort of fluid level design that you expect.
Hmm. Yeah, and it just feels like you're interacting with the cartoon, which is exactly what you want as a kid. Just like I felt like Mickey Mania and those games did a really good job of the same thing. I was just like, man, I would have loved this game as a kid if I'd had it, but I didn't have it.
Right.
So this was actually, interestingly enough, designed by Shinji Mikami, who's known for his work on the Resident Evil series. My boy, yeah, I love Resident Evil, and the Dino Crisis series and the Evil Within. So survival horror. This game's not technically considered a survival horror, although you do run away from lava.
That's true.
And there's a giant snake at the end. So
I
I don't
think
know.
there's a
There's a lot of
lot of
giants.
scary elements and there's a lot of survival, so I
Yeah.
think it would really be unfair to not call it survival horror.
And Shinji Mikami later said that if he hadn't made the SNES game, he would probably buy the Virgin game because it has a sword and better animation. Interesting.
I,
Wow.
I,
So
I like him a lot. I included that quote in our notes because I felt like he's a man of simple pleasures, and I appreciate that. He knows what he likes when he sees it. Aladdin has a sword. I like that one better.
it's like I should have thought of that.
Why didn't I
And
put a
he's like,
sword in
when
my
then
game?
he's gonna make it where Aladdin has a machine gun, and he's like, no, this is even better.
Now that's a game.
Yeah,
That is,
that's a
I
game
would
right
buy that
there.
one. This game was
And
ported to the Game Boy Advance in 2003 and 2004, but to pretty mixed reviews. It was called by one reviewer the most monumentally disappointing SNES to GBA port. Um,
that guy's got too much. He's spending too much time on video games. He's way too disappointed by that point. Like, he's like,
yeah,
listen, of all the SNES to GBA ports, this one is heartbreaking. Like, maybe just go outside sometime, bud. It's okay.
Maybe don't
It's
be
just a
so
port.
invested in this medium.
Yeah, it's just a port, bud. It's just a port. I didn't realize that a GBA port though. Is it speedrun very much, or
I've never played
I
the
guess
GBA port. I wasn't
yeah,
even aware one
I guess
existed
not.
until reading
Yeah, I had no
articles about the
idea.
game.
I wonder if it came out in North America because I've never in all of my video game hunt looking through carts, I don't feel like I've ever realized that. But there's a lot of SNES to GBA ports that I don't realize exist. Like there's so many of them.
Yeah, it's strange to think that this would be the most monumentally disappointing SNES to GBA port. I don't know if this person ever played the A Link to the Past one.
I like the Link to the Past one,
Oh,
but
do you?
yeah,
Weird.
but I played it a lot, considerably after playing the SNES version. So, but he'll be okay. I think he'll be okay.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really cool game. I think we can probably take a quick break again, and then we can get into our ratings about it. So, as we do every week, we're going to do a little rating of this game. We're going to break it down by graphics, music and sound, controls and gameplay, difficulty and fairness, fun and replayability, make any miscellaneous comments we have, and then we'll try and give it an overall rating from 0 to 10. 0 being not good, 10 being it's good. So, and I feel like we could kind of just, I was thinking this and didn't run it by you beforehand, but we could probably just say which one you think was better at each, maybe at the end. I don't know. But,
Oh, yeah, I'm going to be pretty biased on all of them, but sure.
yeah. Okay. So starting out with the graphics, I'll kick this off. The graphics in this game are really gorgeous, I think. Like I said, it does really feel like you're interacting with the cartoon itself, and all of the different levels have really good coloring in them. Like they're just very different. When you're in a dark cave, the blue of the rocks like stands out and it's dark. It fits every scene in the movie that it tries to follow, and it does stay pretty faithful to the movie. The cutscenes in between are really cool. I like when games do that. And yeah, I mean, I think the graphics are great. The animation's really good, like the movement animation. It kind of reminds me a bit of like I'm specifically talking about the SNES version, which I guess we're probably reviewing here because I didn't even play the Genesis. But a little bit of like the Prince of Persia thing, like where there's a lot of animation frames, like a lot of motion going on, like when you're climbing up a ledge or swinging on something, and so I think it looks really pretty.
Yeah, I feel like it's really unique. Like if you just think about compared to other Capcom games, it's very unique. They realized that they were working with a Disney license with such a fluid character because almost every animation feels like it's, a ton of frames. There's just so many cells of animation to it all in a row.
But it doesn't do that thing that Prince of Persia does, where it feels like it gets in the way of control as
No.
much. Like I think some games do it to a further extent where you're not in as much control. Like Mulan on the Game Boy is very similar in that way, but it's like there's so much animation going on that like sometimes you're like, well, no, I want to cancel this and do this, or I'm going to start this animation and get hit while I'm doing it, and it can just become cumbersome. But this feels very fluid.
Right. Yeah, I love the graphics in this game. I'm a huge sucker for that sense of depth you get with a lot of graphics and in both the first world of the SNES version, all of the Agrabah stages, and the third world, the cave when you're sort of in the auto scroller and everything's on fire. Both of those stages have like a fantastic sense of depth. Like it feels like you can really see off into the distance, and you're getting like
Hmm.
proper 3D perspective. The colors are pretty much perfect for this. Everything really pops, especially when you get to work with a license like this. That I mean, of course, it's this Arabian theme, and it's so easy to fall victim to like the dark muted colors. But then you've got like the fantastic genie stages that really pop. You've got the lava stages, which really are
Yeah, there's
fantastic.
one level where you're in the caves and then you fall down like a really far distance where
Mm-hmm.
you get to all of the treasure and gold, and it's like so bright and starkly shining compared to like the dark cave that you were just traversing. Like it does a really good job of just I don't know. I think the coloring is the big point, but also just really taking the environments and sets from the cartoon, from the plot, and porting them over to a game. I think they did an awesome job.
Absolutely.
The music and sound, I think the music's really good. I like it quite a bit. It's very poppy. It's very happy. I will say that I think there's only two, maybe there's three songs from the movie. There's a whole new world,
There's a whole new
and
world.
there's
The
a friend like
genie.
me. Is there any other? As I think it's just those two, but I'm not positive. But out of those two, I will say I think a friend like me,
I
they
guess
they
I guess the
killed
first
it.
step is one step. Um, the whole one step ahead of the bread line.
Oh, do they do that song?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first song is at least a
I didn't
a
I didn't
mix
pick
of
up
it.
on that. I didn't pick up on that. I will say I loved the Genie song. I think they killed that. They did a great job. It felt exactly like that. A Whole New World felt a little empty. Felt a little flat to me. Did like I
Really?
really liked that song and it just didn't quite I don't know. It just felt very tinny and very. I mean, I know it is a SNES sound chip and all that stuff, but it just didn't feel like it was as good as it could have been. Whereas the Genie song, I thought was like
Yeah, I
right on.
when I hear songs like that, because I kind of agree. I mean,
It's a
it's
tough one to make work on a sound chip
I
for a
I
16-bit
always wonder
system.
whether or not it's poor execution or limitations. Like it's such a
Yeah,
fine line, and I don't know enough to know whether what caused it. But I think in general it does a great job of
sure,
being
sure.
what it is. But
But
you're
not
right,
as
it does
good
kind of
when
fall
I was
flat.
playing through it. Like I was really impressed by the Genie song, but just not. The other one just felt like a SNES song, whereas the Genie song really did feel like a little bit more close to the source
And
material.
even
But
if you think that that comment is nitpicky, I mean, to be fair, that stage is an auto scroller that seems to
you have to
only
listen to
really
the music.
highlight, like the whole point of the stage feels like it's really meant to just highlight that song and
Yeah,
just kind of giving
because
you a
there's
relaxing
like no
break.
enemies in it or anything.
No, there's nothing. It's just it's flying around collecting gems. I mean, it's super important in the speed run, but it's meaningless in a casual playthrough. And
Yeah,
so the only point to that stage is to force you to listen to that song. So like if you don't nail it perfectly, it
yeah,
makes the whole thing kind of a waste of 2.5 minutes.
yeah. But it was still good. I think overall the music's really good. I mean, Capcom is just so good at video game music. I just got excited just even turning it on, like the intro music to the like when the Capcom symbol comes up, like the little sound effect, like because it reminded me so much of playing Mega Man X as a kid,
Right.
and just took me back to that like time where like you see that Capcom pop up and you're like, oh, this is a good game about to
Yeah,
happen.
I think
So
in general the music's fantastic in this game. It's definitely one of the redeeming things about playing it.
for
So
sure,
often or at least I play games with terrible music and terrible everything, and I just
yeah.
kind of tune it out. But I don't have to tune this out because it's great.
Played 11 hours of Mega Man 2 on Game Boy the last 2 days, so I feel you on that.
Yeah.
Um, so controls and gameplay.
The controls are super tight in this game. It's a true Capcom game. There's a few points of it where it does kind of have that Prince of Persia feel, where it
Hmm.
feels like it's kind of slippery and slidey, and I think it's sort of in homage to the art style. Like you see Aladdin being very fluid with his movements, and so he's not going to turn around on a dime. He's going
Yeah,
to slide a little bit when he turns and not going to come to a complete stop instantly. But I think even with that in there, having that sort of natural, constant, slight ice physics, the game still controls really tight. Like it's hard to strike that balance between the two, but I think this game does it well.
yeah. I thought this game controlled like just perfectly. I really liked the movement. I mean, I'm not speed running it, so I'm not like having to deal with maybe some of the minutia that you might have to deal with trying to execute things quite perfectly, but as a casual playthrough it just felt really good and it felt a lot of fun to control Aladdin. I'll say like some of the hitboxes were a bit weird, like I have a specific nitpick about bosses that have a sword that they hold above them and like you're supposed to jump on their head, but like certain points you can hit and certain ones you can't, and the first boss is like a really weird hitbox.
Hmm.
And I'm just not a fan of that. But outside of that, like everything just felt like it controlled really well. The cloth or whatever you want to call it that you get to glide with is a lot of fun to use. I think that's a really cool touch that kind of makes it a bit different than some platformers. And there's a lot of uh, intentional, like bouncing off of things' heads to get to higher points, a lot of like hooks that you grab onto and fling yourself upwards. And I thought it all felt really fluid. So
It's a
I'm a
lot
fan
of
of that.
there's a lot of cleverness how they actually set that up. So there's,
Hmm.
for instance, the red gems. There's
Yep.
10 in each stage, and some of them are hidden pretty well, like way out of the way, and you have to figure out how to cleverly jump on enemies to get
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, that's what I was
I'm
gonna say and was thinking like the gameplay wise, like the way the gems are located is a lot of fun because it's like often you're using enemies to get to them, and I
mhm.
think that's kind of cool.
I'm
And I
reminded
think as a kid,
specifically in like one of the last stages, there's an enemy who throws scimitars, like he throws them like boomerangs, and you
mhm.
have to jump on a scimitar and float in the air and wait for him to throw another one to jump higher and higher and higher over and over because one of the gems is way high off
Oh
screen.
wow.
That's actually how you're intended to do it.
Yeah, and you said the gameplay's linear and it is, but I did feel like I mean, it's not completely left or right. There is vertical and
Oh,
some
absolutely.
places where
Yeah.
you can kind of explore, like on the rooftops of Agrabah and stuff like that. And I felt like I was enticed to look around and explore, and that's pretty impressive for a 16-bit game to make me feel that way, especially as a speedrunner when I'm normally just trying to go fast.
Right.
Like it made it. I guess I feel like they did a really good job of the design for the red gems, as simple as it is of like, oh, I just got to get the 10 red gems, of like enticing you into wanting to get them all, and
Right.
also just like rewarding you when you like explored a little nook and it would be like, oh, there's some, normal gems here, there's some sort of benefit. One thing I will say that is really dumb, and I want to really talk about this, some of the treasure chests have bread in them, so I just want you to think about that. Like, somebody has put bread in this treasure chest, and like, I know this is a different time, I know like everybody didn't hate wheat and gluten like they do today, and it was probably more highly treasured, but still, like, I can't imagine that this
I'm more
treasure chest,
concerned.
which is like ornate and covered in gold, would be used to hold a piece of bread. It
I'm
makes no
more concerned
sense.
with the chests in the late game. There's one chest at the very end of the game that's supposed to give you a cloth if you don't have it. But if you already have the cloth, it's just got a cooked chicken in it. It's just a
That's
cooked.
better than a piece of
No,
bread,
it
though.
spoils though. Like how long has it been sitting in that chest? I'm concerned about health
Oh, that's
safety.
true. But it is protecting it from all of the like the rats and the bugs and stuff. So maybe it's a good way to preserve them.
Okay,
I don't know. I just found it strange. I found it strange,
we'll do a whole
and
podcast on the antibacterial
and
properties of
it's probably
ornate
going to reflect in my
Arabian
overall
chests.
rating. It's going to
Okay.
reflect in my overall rating that I don't respect that happened. Fun and or difficulty and fairness. I think this game seems pretty fair. It wasn't like a breeze. The levels that I played through, but I mean it's on the easier side, but it's still, there was a lot of places I fell in holes. There's like, you know the ground will fall out below you or different things, and I did go through like a continue or two to beat the first couple levels, so like you can die for sure.
I
And
was a real stupid kid and I beat this game probably 100 times.
yeah, I
So
mean, I definitely think once you know where things are coming and what enemies where, or what, you know I'll take a jump and be floating and not reach a platform by the end,
Disney
and I'll
has
be like,
this
oh, I fell.
Disney has
But
this
yeah.
like well documented history of making games that are very difficult at the second stage. Whether it was ever confirmed by Disney or not, the theory at least is that
Rentals.
they always made the second stage very difficult, so you couldn't beat it easily in one rental sitting, and you would be forced to buy the game if you liked it.
Hmm.
But this game stands in super contrast to that.
Hmm.
I feel like this game is more or less a breeze through the entire game. There's a few worlds that present like a unique challenge. I feel like the pyramid levels can be pretty tough your first
Hmm.
time playing it, or if you're not really an experienced platformer, because like the sand flowing off the edges prevents you from being able to grab edges like you're usually able to, and a lot of the moving platforms have these weird cycles and stuff. So I can understand it being difficult a little bit, but the whole
Yeah, Lion
game
King's
is
the famous example of that. With the somebody
yeah.
just brought that up in chat with the level where you're riding the ostrich or whatever, and that level's just like nobody beat that as a kid, unfortunately, or probably didn't for a very long time. Um, so yeah, I'd say it's fair though, for sure. I think it's probably tens on the easy side. I died a bunch, like just making jumps that I shouldn't have, or trying to float, and there's no platform to land on. Um, but it was still fun. Like, I mean, it wasn't so easy that it took away from the fun. Like that's how I felt. I still felt like it was It was enough of a challenge to be interesting. Fun and replayability outside of getting the 100 or the 10 gems per level. There's the replayability just comes from it's fun to control and it's got good music, good graphics. It's a fun, breezy, positive game. Like it
I would
makes you
say
feel
that
good playing it.
the collection of the red gems definitely makes it feel like it's got at least a little bit more replayability than your standard platformer,
Hmm.
but probably not by much. I mean, if anything, the most replayable thing about it is the Chinese bootleg of the Capcom version.
Hmm.
There's a Hummer Team bootleg of Aladdin for
Yeah, I saw Joe play that recently.
it's
What
really
does that
good.
have to do with the fun and replayability? That makes it more replayable.
Yeah, because I that would make me want to replay it over and over.
Because you want to replay. Okay, I don't know if that counts because it's a different game, but I'll take that as a point in its favor.
No,
I
I
watched Joe
that's
play it.
enough for me.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Pretty interesting. That I always love what Hummer Team can do. Any miscellaneous thoughts?
Hummer Team made a bootleg of this game, so it has to be good.
Yeah. Yep. Hummer Team's the best. Okay, so overall rating from 0 to 10. You want me to go first?
Yeah.
All right. I'd give this a 7. I think it's a really good game. Seven's as high as I can go for a game that's this simple. But the graphics, the music, it's a lot of fun, and I really was just impressed when I put it in, feeling like this is exactly what I would want if I was a kid. I got home from watching Aladdin in the theater, and my parents got me a game about Aladdin. This is exactly what I'd want, and that same exact situation was botched by so many different games of so many different movies and different franchises and different cartoons and TV shows that it just felt perfect. So I think if I was a kid, this would be a 10 out of 10 for what I wanted it to be. But yeah, I'll give it a 7.
That's unfortunate if you were excited to play it right after you saw the movie because it took almost a whole year for them to.
Well, I'm just saying if it but maybe I just saw the movie at a discount theater a year after, and my
That better have
parents
been
couldn't
a
afford a full
that
movie
better have
ticket.
been a hell of a discount. Jesus. Um.
You're literally the worst.
Yeah, I was probably gonna go with a 6, but I think a seven's pretty fair. I'm gonna stick with the 6. So here's the thing: is that I think that this game has fantastic music, fantastic. I think it is a near perfect speed game, but I think just as a game, it's a little bit lacking in depth. It's too
Sure.
easy in my opinion. I think the thing that makes me not want to give it a really high rating is that I actually think it's too easy. I certainly think that games like Lion King went way overboard, but I think this game could have definitely stepped it up and made it
Sure.
a lot more
I think
challenging.
6 is fair too. I mean, I just think they did a really good job what it is. Like for a platformer for children, based on a property that is popular, I feel like they did exactly what you'd want them to do.
Right.
So you can go ahead and tweet at us at the Frame Savers with any of your complaints about our ratings, per always. We're gonna take a quick break, listen to some of that fresh music, and then Chad's gonna tell us about this hot speed game. So, if you're not aware, Aladdin is a really sweet speed game. It's actually a very highly optimized speed game. So much so, the world record was actually just taken from La Hulk. Joe D'Amelio got a 1611.2, and La Hulk's previous world record was a 1612.9. So, a little more than a second in between first and second place. This game is just one of those speed games where splits are plus or minus zero point 0.1, zero point 0.2 all the time. It's
Actually,
a
I think
really awesome game.
the 1612.9 is actually more recent. The Hulk's been trying to keep up with
Oh,
Joe. I think the world record was only just barely a 1613 though, so it wasn't a huge change.
yeah. Yeah, I mean
But yeah, Joe
it's a game,
D'Amelio,
it's a fractions game. I mean, every
yeah.
split is trying to save zero point 0.2 seconds here or whatever.
It's been
It's
over
crazy.
like the past month or so. Joe D'Amelio has been putting in. I think at this point he's probably put in nearly 10,000 attempts
Yeah, he's been
into the
going hard.
game. Yeah, long nights all in a row. It's been fantastic to watch though. The game, it's really interesting the way this game sort of goes through its renaissance, because the game will basically be dead for a while. Everyone will be pretty content with where the leaderboard is, and then someone will find some 1 or 2 second strat that will save time, and then it's like a mad dash to break the record again.
Yeah, and then there's also a 100% category, which involves getting all 1724 in that. That's not as highly optimized. He said there's still room for growth in that category. That's actually what he just did at GDQ because donation incentive got reached for 100%, and it's got a bunch of cool movement and stuff that you don't get to see in the any percent run. So it's definitely worth checking out. Kind of a little bit neglected maybe in terms of the amount of runs that get put into this game and the amount of effort, but still a cool run.
Yeah, it's the 100% run is a ton of fun to watch. It's really interesting because, like you mentioned, the stages do wind around a little bit if you're actually hunting for all of the red gems. But watching the way that a lot of that movement has really been made more linear, so instead of having to backtrack all over the place, figuring out ways to get to the gems without a lot of out of the way movement has been really fascinating to watch. It's definitely a category that I find really interesting and would probably be interested in learning eventually. So it's really neat
Yeah,
to see that
I don't
happening.
see your name in this top two here. I don't like that
Oh, for the any percent,
for
yeah,
any of it. Yeah,
I've got a 1650 something. I
basically
got.
garbage, basically worthless.
I mean, yes,
I'm just kidding. I'm
that
just kidding. This is a very hard speed game, and you did work on this for a while. I mean, getting sub 17 is really good. It's
yeah.
a
This was
it's a
one of the
hard speed game.
this is one of the earlier games I learned because I had it from my childhood and I really loved it. And I got to like a 1820 and then I stopped playing it. And then quite recently I decided I really wanted to get a sub 17 time. So I
Yeah, that's
learned
awesome.
the strats, grinded it out. I could still do to lower my time even more. I'd love to get somewhere around a 1630. I definitely don't want to put in Joe D'Amelio amount of work into this game.
Absolutely. There's also a lot of RNG to this game
There
to get
is.
to. So
So that being said, actually, it's really interesting. So what John's referring to is there is some RNG that controls some things that you'd really love to save time on. Second to last fight is a fight against Jafar, where based on what patterns he does, you can get a quick kill on him. So if he does the right pattern first, you can save like 8 seconds versus having to wait for him to do the bad pattern and then do the good attack that you're waiting for so that you can set up the quick kill. It actually turns out that the main thing that messes with RNG in this game is Abu, because the game's constantly checking or constantly polling the RNG in order to decide, does Abu, make a face? Does he run left? Does he run right? Does he run fast? Does he run slow? Does he jump around? Like it's constantly, it, basically Abu being on screen constantly manipulates the RNG, but he's only on
interesting.
screen right at the beginning of the game. And so one way that Joe D'Amelio found a long time ago was you could actually manipulate the RNG if you take a strategic death in the auto scroller at just the right time. So you only lose like 3 or 4 seconds, but you can guarantee that you get the best pattern on Jafar and pretty much the best pattern on the final boss, which is the snake. The snake loses a little less time based on RNG, but it can still lose time based on whether or not the snake does his like lunging move where like the head dives at Aladdin, because
Hmm.
then his head comes down and you can jump on it, or if he spits out the eggs, which you can use those to jump up to the snake head, but also they cause a ton of lag on
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen this fight, essentially it's a giant snake that you're standing on, and the head is the hitbox that you're trying to hit. The intended way of killing him is uh, just like snakes normally do, it just spits a bunch of eggs out of its mouth
Yeah.
because that's science.
Hmm.
And so you're supposed to use like we said, a lot of the objects and different enemies in this game. A big mechanic of the game is to jump off of things, and Aladdin does this kind of spring animation, and so you're supposed to use those to jump off of its head, but it does really create a lot of lag, a lot of noticeable lag. So they do a lot of damage boosting. They essentially they when you get 100 gems, you gain an extra heart and it refills your health. So they intentionally do a big health refill right before the Jafar fight, I believe. And then they have, if you get the perfect pattern on that, you don't, I think you only take one hit of damage. And then you basically use all the rest of your hearts to kind of damage boost and jump to where you can barely hit the snake on his hitbox. So it's a really precise, interesting fight to watch. It's a lot more difficult than it appears, I would say.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this game is that it doesn't refill your apples. So, like I said, you can throw apples in this game. It doesn't refill your apples between stages. It doesn't refill your health between stages. You
Yeah,
basically
that's a
get
big
nothing.
bummer. I forgot to
Um,
point that out for difficulty and fairness because I did think that was a bit, strange for a Disney game that they didn't
right.
refill your health after
Well, there's
like because stages are broken into like four parts, so it
right.
makes sense in between each part, but even between the main stages, it still doesn't refill your health. So
Yeah, if you're taking your time, there's like pots everywhere that you might want to turn
yeah,
over, and you'd
just
get
bread and
bread
treasure
or
chests.
or chickens that would fully refill your health. So it's not that bad for a casual playthrough, but for speedrunning, you obviously don't want to slow down for stuff like that. So what happens is in this game, every time you collect 100 gems, you get an additional heart container and it refills your health immediately. And so throughout the run, it's sort of strategically timed out so that you get health refills at really opportune times. You actually, over the course of the entire run, have to map out collecting 300 gems because you want to collect that 300th gem or more right before you hit the Jafar fight, because
Mhm.
the Jafar that you fight, the next to last boss, you shouldn't have to take any damage on him if everything goes properly. And then the snake fight, you want to have, I guess at that point you would have
I think
six
you have
hearts.
six. Yeah.
And so you would use 5 hearts to damage boost on the snake over and over. Basically, you
Mhm.
you use his recoil from taking damage to get enough height to land on his head, even when his head's not down.
And then hopefully the last few hits, because you can't damage boost through every single hit,
Mm-mm.
you're hoping that he comes down and lunges at you, just shooting the eggs at you. So
Right.
it's a lot going on there. I will say I'm concerned about the only bread and meat diet because there's no fruit and vegetables in that, and I don't think that really teaches children proper nutrition. But
He's constantly got apples, though. You've got to imagine that he's
that's
eating one once in a
true.
while.
But he throws them like they're
Yeah, the numbers never
worthless.
go down. It's basically like he's saying he hates fruits and
It's like he
vegetables.
doesn't even understand their nutritional value.
It's crazy talk.
I think the main thing, and I'd love to hear you talk about this. The main thing you'll notice watching this speed run is the cape pumping, and this is the main point of movement tech in the speed run, and it's a big reason why I will never speed run this game. But why don't you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so in general for movement, you can maintain some speed when you jump off of slopes and things like that. Aladdin there is a run button, and when you run down slopes, you get a little bit of speed that you can maintain when you jump. But in general, you basically have one fixed speed. The interesting thing about that is that every time you pull out your cape, you actually get pushed forward. I think it's either 1 or 2 pixels. I can't remember the amount, but it's very similar to when we talked about Super Metroid, the sort of arm pumping that
Mhm.
Samus does. As you pump the arms up and down, you sort of get pushed forward a pixel every single time, and that adds up over the course of an entire run. And so when you watch this game being speedrun, you often will be looking for moments of flat ground running, things that aren't in your way, so that you can jump into the air and mash cape as quickly as possible, and as soon as you land, you jump in the air again and start mashing cape as quickly as possible.
It's a lot of mashing,
I
and it's
think
all R mashing.
it depends. You can change your controls so that cape is on X, but I actually find that much more difficult to combine with all the other buttons on the
Sure.
controller. um, yeah, so Joe D'Amelio uses X and he mashes that way. LaHulk uses R and he mashes that way. They both mash incredibly fast. Joe made
Yeah.
a human theory task, which I think he limited it. So he part of the human theory task, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, a human theory task is basically creating a task that puts in certain restrictions that you can only use strats so it would be possible by an actual human. And so part of that was not just mashing the button once per frame, on and off that fast. So I think they ended up settling on mashing 10 times per second was what they came up with. It was either 6 or 10 times per second. I can't remember if it was 6 hertz or once every 6 or
Sure.
6 per second. Anyway, so they ended up sort of setting a limit like that, which is still insanely fast, but manageable if you watch these guys play. I mean, Joe, like if you watch Joe play this run, he mashes at an ungodly pace. It's just you're watching Aladdin go so quickly back and forth between his cape animation and his falling animation.
Yeah, and what was the human theory task's like final time?
I think it was a low 16. I don't remember offhand though.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They were
It's
basically
it's really
working
fun to
toward that
watch
number.
like really good mashers that do speedrunning. Like because I'm terrible at mashing. Like I'm definitely below average for speedrunner. Like I've just been around like even people like you and stuff. You guys all mash way faster than me. But like Cypher started doing Rockman 2 runs again, and like just the mashing that you watch is just like man, it's so impressive. And this game is just filled with just constant cape grabs. It's cool to see how they're routed into so many little spots just to get a couple more of them in. I would say the other big thing in this speed run is just avoiding like grabbing ledges and stuff is a big part of it. You'll notice a lot of platforms they'll mash perfectly to float to the point where they can land on a platform without grabbing it. Whereas like I think usually the intended way to get there would be to ledge grab. The only mistake Joe made in his world record is he grabbed one ring like that cost him like 0.5 seconds. Outside of that, his run's almost perfect. I mean, it's just insane. So,
Yeah, the level of
I mean,
optimization Joe's runs at right now is. I mean, LaHulk is an incredible speedrunner, and he's been having to work hard to.
Hulk has like 30 or 40 SNES world records or something. I mean, the guy is a machine. Both of these guys definitely deserve your follow. Joe's I know him from Link to the Past. He's done a bunch of Castlevania stuff. The Hulk's just everything SNES. I know when they did the SNES All Stars thing, like I think he had like 15, 20 runs he had to do. It was just ridiculous. So it's a really fun speed run to watch though for sure. Not for me though. I can't do it. I can't.
Yeah, a lot of the techniques that have been found over the course of the history of this game is figuring out ways to either like get an extra enemy out of your way. So you start the game with 10 apples, but there's really no great opportunity in the speed route to get more apples until the very end of the game. So you're basically rationing out 10 apples over the course of the entire run. And it was only quite recently that they figured out a strat for picking up more apples in World 4 in the Genie's Lamp without losing any time. And so that was a huge improvement to the run because that meant that not only would they have more apples to use later in the run, but that meant that the 10 apples could be used more frequently in the earlier
Mhm.
parts of the run. But a lot of these little improvements that are made, the most recent route improvement was figuring out that in the log stage, so there's a stage where you're riding a log down a river in the caves, and there's these walls that come down, and you have to pull down the rope for the
Yep.
wall to go up. And they actually discovered that if you land on the log, it gets pushed down just far enough that they were able to basically duck underneath one of the walls. It ended
If
up
you
saving
time
a
the
ton of
right,
time.
yeah, if you time the right landing right beforehand, interesting. Yeah, and they take some damage and boost through there too. So, you
It's
like
really amazing
apples?
watching this
You
run.
like apples?
I do love apples, but not.
How you like them apples?
Oh man,
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
I'm
Any
so
last
upset.
thoughts about Aladdin?
This is a really easy game to pick up and learn. Um, the stages themselves, like understanding how to do the routes through them, is actually very straightforward. And so I think for a lot of people, this is a really attainable game. This is a very easy game to pick up and learn. If you use a flash card or something like that, I actually made a little practice ROM that helped with it a little bit.
No,
If
cool.
you play on emulator, you can just save state everywhere. So I guess that doesn't really apply to you. But it's a really easy game to learn. There's a ton of people to help. It's fun. So try it.
Do it. Play the game,
Yep.
and we'll be right back. We're going to talk about Hook. So moving on from Aladdin, now we're going to talk about Hook. So in December of 1991, Steven Spielberg directed an American fantasy adventure film called Hook, starring Dustin Hoffman and Robin Williams, two really famous actors. You got Rain Man, you got Mrs. Doubtfire. You got a hit on your hands, and this is a twist on the classic story of Peter Pan, where Peter's been basically he's grown up. He forgot about his childhood. He forgot that he is Peter Pan, and so he ends up returning to Neverland to take on Captain Hook once more. I haven't seen this movie literally since like 1991, 1992. I really want to go back and see it. People seem really all about Rufio, all about the things. I want to go back and watch it, but I haven't seen it in a long
Yeah,
time.
he
But
goes back and rescues his children because his children get kidnapped. It's a whole ordeal. You know, he sees
What's
Tinkerbell
it to
again,
do?
played by Julia Andrews Julie Andrews,
Julia Roberts?
Julia Roberts. Thank you. Why did I
Yeah,
say Andrews?
Julia Roberts is in this too. There's a lot of famous people. It's a hot film.
It also
Which
had
film's better? Which is a better film?
it had Hopkins,
Dustin,
Bob,
Anthony Hopkins,
no, no, Bob Hoskins as
Bob
Mr. Smee.
Hoskins,
Yeah, Bob
Mario.
Hoskins. May I don't know, man. I'm forgetting every
Bob
name.
Hoskins was Mario. We should do a whole I need to do a pocket episode just on the Mario movie. I own it on DVD. I liked that movie as a kid.
You can
That's
just
a
you
sidetrack.
can just watch it and you can do a whole pocket where you talk your way through it. Like, go ahead and play this pocket while you watch the movie,
It can be
and
interactive with.
I'll commentate it.
Okay, so which one of these films is better, Chad?
Oh, between Aladdin and Hook.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean,
It's tough. Live action versus animation.
I feel like at this point, if I was asked to choose between the two, I'd probably pick Hook. But
Sure, it's a
I
little bit
think
more
Aladdin's
adult.
the better movie.
Yeah. Okay. And so yeah, the development for this game, based off the movie, obviously started in January of the next year, 92, in October, and Sony Image Soft, sorry, and Yuki Yote, also known for the game Sky Blazer, another good SNES game, which is completely unrelated, released a platformer for the SNES and the Sega CD, and based loosely on the events of the film.
Yeah, the game Skyblazer actually plays kind of similarly to Hook in some ways. The animations are very similar, and it really feels like, I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but it really feels like they may be based on the same engine a little bit. So,
Yes,
it's just,
Sky Blazer is a cool game.
yeah, it is a cool game. So I guess if you're gonna steal the engine of any game to make Hook, that was a good one to pick. But
Yeah,
I don't know if it's ever been confirmed that they're actually related, but they feel very similar at least.
interesting.
Yeah, so in this game, Peter's weapon is a dagger or a sword, something like that, and he runs, jumps, swims, and flies through a variety of levels that resemble scenes from the movie. Some of it resembles scenes from the movie. Some of it's a little bit it's borrowed. I'm
Yeah,
just,
see, it's tough for me because I haven't seen the movie in so.
I
It's all
mean,
from the film.
there's not a lot of Peter Pan running through snow levels in the movie, but I
That's
mean
true.
there's a lot
Does
of
he
him
fight any
like
blimps? Does he fight any blimps that drop bombs?
I don't remember the blimps in the movie or the giant fish, but I do remember him running around on Captain Hook's ship. So I feel like you get a little bit of a pass for that.
I find it strange that this is called Hook, that the movie was called Hook instead of like Pan, because like
Right, but
Hook's
I
the
mean,
bad guy.
I guess it's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory versus Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's like,
But it's not like Aladdin. Like, what if they called it Jafar? Like, that's weird.
yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I
It's
don't know.
fine.
I
I
don't like
forgive
it.
them. This game has no password system, but it does have infinite continues. So I'd say this one's actually a fairly easy game as well.
Oh, I
Um,
have a big thing to point out that really bothered me.
Go
Password
for it.
is 2 words in Aladdin in the game.
Oh, is it?
I should have docked it down to a 6 for that.
Yeah, that one's
Same
easily
with
a
Mega Man
six.
2, which I've been playing a lot. I'm being encountered by this password being 2 words thing at all angles. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's a little bit rough. So this was actually one of quite a few games that were based on the Hook
Mhm.
license. There was a point and click adventure for the DOS and the
Which you
Amiga and Atari.
speedran, right?
I did just sort
I
of,
remember watching you speedrun this.
just
It's
kind
like
of,
you love speedrunning point and click adventures.
yeah. It was kind of the cross. It was kind of the crossroads of me speedrunning Hook and speedrunning Monkey Island at the same time. And I was like, wait, there's a point and click adventure game Hook. I'm sold. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have been sold though. My
It was
standards
like
are.
3 minute speedrun. I remember it was very short. Your
Uh,
standards exist.
Yeah, it's rough. There
ish.
was also an arcade side-scrolling beat 'em up based on
Wow,
Hook,
that's awesome.
the Robin Williams film Hook.
Yeah,
And there's also this really like
that's
awkward.
we need a side-scrolling beat 'em up for Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, that one would actually work. It'd be kind of like the Simpsons arcade game. She's just rolling through the streets, beating people with her
Or
purse.
Goodwill Hunting, the side-scrolling beat 'em up. See, the apples line fit. I didn't even think about the Robin Williams connection.
Wow.
Wow, good
There was
day,
also
good
another
day.
platformer for the NES and Game Boy that are very
Oh, it's
similar. It's a
not
real bad
good.
game. It's a
I've
real bad game.
I've played literal seconds of the Game Boy game. I'm not looking forward to having to beat it. It's bad.
There's
Just go
other.
look at just go look at the main character sprite. That's all you need to look at, and you're gonna be like, yeah,
Did they ever
this
make
is
a
great.
video game based on Disney's Peter Pan? I can't think of a single one. I mean, there's Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates for the NES, which
Yes,
is
that's what I was thinking
also
of.
real bad, like real hot and bad, like
Yeah.
hot garbage. But I don't know whether or not they ever made a Disney's Peter Pan video game. I hope that there is one day.
I think I just realized that hot garbage is bad because it smells worse than like cold garbage.
Yes.
So I never really tied that together in my. So there you go.
We're opening hearts and minds here, people.
This was released to high praise for the SNES version. I assume not for or the other versions, and especially considering the low expectations for a movie license game. I think a lot of people consider, uh, movie license games to be shovelware or expect them to be. I think this was still at the point though where you didn't feel that way always. Like it was hit or miss.
Right.
I think once you get to like the GBA and the Wii, and, the GameCube and PS1, you started getting more a more consistent rate of hot garbage, which smells worse than cold garbage.
Yeah. Once they got later in the Nintendo life cycle, like once we got into GameCube and N64 and Wii and the later consoles, the licensed games just felt like they were trying less hard.
Oh, apparently there was a PS1 Peter Pan Return to Neverland game. Next report
Perfect.
says.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm
Um,
looking forward to you speedrunning that for weeks to come.
yeah, I think the quote I remember seeing from the reviewer said something along the lines of, "It's everything you'd expect from a movie license game, except it's good."
Hmm.
So I took that as high praise. That felt like about the highest praise you can give to
Yeah.
any one thing.
So I think we can just dive right into our
Yeah,
ratings.
for sure.
So graphics.
So if you've never played Hook, the what's about to come is going to blow your mind. But I think that this game, both graphics and music and sound, knocks it out of the park. It's
Mhm.
absolutely fantastic. The game is gorgeous in the most unbelievable way. It's absolutely gorgeous. The first stage, like you're flying through it and it's changing seasons. Like it's visual storytelling.
Mhm.
Like you're flying through it and it starts off and it's in the spring, and then when you get a little further, the leaves change to brown, so it's in the
Mhm.
fall, and then when you're flying through the tunnel, it starts to snow, so it's winter, and then it
I
gets
did
to the
not
other
pick up on
side.
this. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's chronicling him relearning about being Peter Pan. Because the first stage is like a tutorial. It teaches you how to play the game. There's no
Yeah.
real enemies. You're just running around.
Oh,
Uh,
there's enemies. I died
well,
in the
yeah,
first level many times
yeah, the
because I'm bad.
what are they called? The Lost Boys.
Yeah, the
Um,
Lost Boys.
if they run into you, they hurt you. But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
there's no like bad guys in it. It's your guys running into you, but it's fantastic. It's gorgeous, and it continues throughout the whole game. The graphics are fantastic from start to finish. I've nothing but
Yeah,
praise for it.
I actually thought the Aladdin graphics were better. I'm gonna be honest. I know that sounds crazy. I thought the first stage seemed a little like some of the colors seemed a bit off, but I'm taking some nits and I'm picking them. But I will say the game is gorgeous. It is a really good looking game. There's a lot of color. There's a lot of different environments, just like Aladdin. Both these games really do stand out graphically for the 16-bit games that they are. I think I mean, there's other cartoon based games that don't have that kind of level of detail, and like I'm thinking of like Goof Troop, for example, or something like that. These both these games have, varied environments, really unique levels, a lot of color, a lot of detailed backgrounds, like not just the background you're in, but like in the distance. I don't know that I have a lot of parallax scrolling to that effect, but still, like there's a lot of detail in the background.
Sure.
The sprites look really good. Like Peter Pan looks really good. So I really like that. Like when you die, which I did often, you transform back into like adult.
Yeah, Peter Banner.
Whatever Peter, whatever his name is. Yeah, so that I thought that was like a really cool effect. Like you like get knocked out of Neverland, or you're not Peter Pan anymore. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I thought it was pretty
you
pretty
go
good.
back to wearing your like slacks and your dicky and
Yeah.
your
Moving to music and sound, just because you kind of said something about that already. Like the music in this game is really really good. I like the music in this. I thought the music was is just top notch, and I mean, it reminded me of watching you kind of grind down runs of this, but there's not a level that doesn't have a really catchy and enjoyable tune. None of them are songs that I recognize like in Aladdin, but I had some notes like it's very orchestral music. Like it's definitely orchestral, and I really love like the snare tones especially. Like I'm a sucker for like really tight, and it's probably because I did percussion, like orchestral percussion for like 8 years as a kid, but like really tight sounding snare tones always like shock me when they're coming from like a video game sound chip, like a 16-bit sound chip. And a lot of like the brass instruments and stuff, like it all sounds very full and really good. I mean, certain instruments like don't translate as well, like some flutes and stuff like that, but for the most part it's really good like orchestral music. I really liked it quite a bit, and so yeah, I the music's some of the best I've heard on the SNES, to be honest. Really good music.
Yeah, I mean they were very fortunate. The original soundtrack for the movie was by John Williams,
Yeah, so
and
are they actually the songs from the movie? Because
yeah, and
like the
he
music was
actually
really good.
yeah he helped with the rearranging for it.
Okay,
So
that
he
makes
helped.
sense now.
So John Williams helped with rearranging the music. So this game released for both the SNES and the Sega CD. And
Oh, it'd be interesting to hear the Sega CD music.
yeah, so the music for the Sega CD is basically uh, reimagined, reorchestrated, whatever the word for it is. But for the Sega CD, and then I imagine some amount of digitization had
Nailed
to
it.
happen in order to
Sure.
compress it for the SNES. But it's honestly a fantastic soundtrack. The music is just wonderful from title screen. The first stage is like really dramatic. All of the music's really good.
That makes
It
so
kind of
much more
mixes it up
sense.
with like ambient and it's really great.
It makes so much more sense because I was like, wow, they like really wrote very good orchestral music for this video game, for this children's video game.
Right.
Like why did this happen? So it makes sense that they like took the John Williams music, who if you don't know is a very famous, has made the soundtracks of like all of the movies that you think have amazing music. He wrote all of it. Like he did the
Star Wars.
Jurassic Park movies, Star Wars, like just all kinds of stuff. I think he did Jurassic Park, but yeah, that makes sense, and it translates really well. They did a really good job making the tones actually sound good. So if you're a fan of orchestral music or classical music, you'll probably really get a kick out of it.
Right. Yeah,
Okay,
it's fantastic.
I know you love this game. You're gonna start hearing me say really, so I just want to prepare you in advance. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, you want me to start with controls and gameplay?
Yeah, I'm just
All right.
before you get angry at me.
So I think that this game suffers from that problem with it's a little bit frustrating playing this casually because when you want to like turn around, you have this like huge slide recoil before you finally can start going the other direction. I think flying can be a little bit clumsy. It feels really good once you get used to it. Like it's not difficult to maneuver, but I think once you start playing this game, it can be a little bit challenging. In general, I feel like the controls and the platforming is fairly tight, but at the same time, I feel like it has kind of a steep learning curve. When you start playing this game, I think it can be a little bit frustrating. The level design doesn't really it doesn't really encourage you to go out of your way. It doesn't encourage you to try things. It kind of, by the time level 2 starts, it just starts posting enemies literally everywhere, which can be really frustrating. It doesn't give you a lot of room to try things out and explore. But I think in general, I think it controls pretty well.
So let's say you were a farmer
Oh my
and
god.
you dropped a chicken in a vat of butter and then drop the same chicken in a vat of honey, and then you tried to chase it and catch it with your bare hands, that kind of
Did the honey
is,
make it less slippery or more slippery? Also, why am I a farmer?
I mean, it's called an analogy. It's called
What
an
would you
analogy.
what would you say an analogy is, John?
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you this. This farmer's clearly not a very good farmer because he's holding his chicken above vats of butter and honey.
All right.
But this game was so frustrating to control. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so slow. Like, the movement is so slow, and it takes a long time to get your P speed or whatever, your momentum, whatever you want to call it, like, to like a normal clip. Like, I never would have realized this. Like, I've watched only the speed run of this, and you keep that momentum throughout most of the run, and it looks really great. And it's like a normal speed for a video game to go. But imagine that most of the time you're not going that fast. You're going much slower. Like, reaction time is so frustrating. Like, if somebody's behind you and you tap right and hit attack, like, you can just go like make a sandwich and come back and wait for him to attack. Like, just ugh, I was so frustrated because this game has so much, beautiful graphics, beautiful music. Like, I think it has some really cool elements to it. Like, um so we didn't talk about a lot of like the gameplay elements, but I actually messaged off because I was like, how do you fly? I'm trying to fly. I know I need to fly. And you have to go under like this fairy dust or whatever and refill your flying ability. And so that's really cool, like a cool mechanic. And then you can fly but freely, but only for a bit. But just the way everything controlled just was so frustrating. Even the swimming and the flying is weird. You hold the B button and then you just use the D pad and move free range wherever you want. Like, there's no, like, in when you're swimming, there's no tapping B to float to the top or
Yeah, there's
whatever,
no
like every
gravity or
swimming
anything.
video game. Like, so there's no gravity, there's no physics of that point. So I was really frustrated. This seems like the kind of game where if I got it as a kid, like, I don't know if it's like if I rented it, I would get tired of it or feel forced to play it, or like if you were a kid and you only had a couple games and you were forced to play it a lot, once you got used to the physics and the movement and the controls, I think you would really love the game. But like that initial start to playing the game is really frustrating. Like, it just does not control very tightly, and like reaction time, especially for attacking an enemy or turning around. I remember specifically in level 3, like there's this sword that you can grab, which is exciting because then you can like shoot magic sword dust, which is great. But like there's also an enemy that falls down on you at the same time, and there's like every single time I grabbed the sword, I got hit by the enemy because I couldn't turn around in time to hit him. And so I got real frustrated about that and the platforming. The flying runs out real quick, so you really gotta monitor that and keep that, exactly, you know utilize that exactly properly, which would have frustrated me as a kid because the flying is the fun part. You want to be Peter Pan and fly around, and you can fly around for like 3 seconds, and the game's like, screw you, go find some magic fairy dust. So
John
I
definitely
found
wrote
it
this all
frustrating.
down. John
Yeah.
definitely wrote all this down. He just had like a hate list he needed to
Yeah, I
run
found
through.
it very frustrating.
Yeah, I can
But
understand that you found it frustrating. It's
but
one of
I
those
I can
games that
I
if you
definitely can
play
see,
around in
like,
it for 10 minutes, it gets a lot better. But
not 10 minutes. I played it for longer than 10 minutes, but I could see, like, after a few hours of playing this game,
sure.
like, getting used to it and liking it. It's just even so, like, when you're not speed running it, like, the standard rate of running around is way too slow.
Right.
Um, like to get the momentum up. Like, 'cause even when you get your momentum, like, you're not really going that fast, but compared to how slow you go normally. So I was very frustrated to leave it there. Now the gameplay does have a bunch of unique elements, like I said, and I think it deserves points for that. Like, you can fly, you can, which is a really cool mechanic. There's a lot of like vertical exploration and stuff. I think it's got some unique concepts to it, but yeah,
Yeah.
I've done my rant's over.
Yeah, it's a good game once you get more comfortable. It can definitely be a frustrating casual experience. I would say that it's really magnified by the level design. I think that
Yes.
level 2 is inherently frustrating because of the way that it's just crowded with enemies. And then level 3 is a vertical climbing stage, which really tests your ability to do what is ultimately already frustrating platforming. So while I think it's a really great game, I think it's sort of a compounded problem with some of the level design. So
Yeah,
I'll
level
grant you
3
that.
was really frustrating. And then also once you get to the you you need enough flight to get out of the level. And so I did not have that. And so you have to go back down to get your thing refilled, and you die on the way down, turn it off, and then you complain about it on a podcast. That's it.
John started this podcast just so he could complain about games.
Yep.
Not the bad games. He talks nicely about those ones.
I have historically rated games probably too high, and higher than most people have, or higher than you have. So I just want to point.
I don't know. I am a renowned bad video games apologist.
Yeah. Okay. So difficulty and fairness, it's impossible. No one's ever beaten it, and it's frustrating. You can't move very well.
Agree to disagree. How about fun and replayability?
I don't know. I actually would want you to weigh in on this, because I mean, I didn't beat the whole game, but I don't know if there's much outside of this pretty linear experience.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're the sort of person who's really interested in score in a SNES
Whew.
platformer, which I don't know what sort of person you are, but unless that's
You can
the
go
sort
to
of thing.
www.twingalaxies.com.
Oh, that is a spicy, timely take.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
there's not a lot that's replayable about it. I find it super fun. A lot of the later levels really start to ramp up the maze-like structure of them, so it's kind of interesting to see everything that's in the stage. There's some like little hidden goodies that are out of the way. You know, if you're
What
willing
about
to go.
fun? I feel like we always focus on the replayability
No, that's what I was saying.
realizing
I was
like,
saying
the fun,
like
right?
I was saying that for the later stages, the maze-like levels, it's kind of fun to explore in the stages. It's a
Mhm.
lot less linear, so you do get that opportunity to just kind of stretch out and explore a little bit. Like, for instance, the dark cave.
You think that would be fun?
I don't know. I
Like, if
mean,
you were a kid, would that be fun? I don't think that would be fun if I was a kid.
I'd spend a lot of time lost. That's increasing the value of my game. Every moment I spend playing it, that's added value.
Kids are always worried about financial value, about the ROI. They're always about that ROI.
I'm saying that sometimes you have to think about the value, and sometimes you have to think about the added value. That's all I'm trying to get at here.
I think both these games don't have a ton of replayability outside.
Yeah, they're your standard
platformers.
platformers. I mean,
they're not Link to the Past. They're not Super Metroid. They're linear, and that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing. But miscellaneous thoughts? Because I mean, did you grow up with this game?
I did rent it as a kid. I think it's way better than it has any right to be, and I will stand by that to my death. I cannot. If you had told me that a platformer based on Hook was going to be such a great game, I'd say
sure.
No, I'd say yes. No, I'd say no.
You say maybe, no, yes, no.
I mean, compared to all the other options you have, the NES Game Boy platformer or the side-scrolling arcade beat 'em up, honestly, this is your best choice in hook-based video gaming.
Unless you want to play the Amiga point-and-click adventure.
Unless you want to play the Amiga point-and-click adventure. If you're really into point-and-click adventures, maybe.
So what would you give this overall rating? I'm going to let you go first this time. We're not going to have the same number here.
Yeah, probably not. I think I would actually give this one a 7. I think it's a really good game. I'm definitely biased by the fact that I've speedrun the game, so the controls aren't very frustrating to me. But I think that this is a fantastic game. The graphics and the music alone almost sell me on a 7. And then I think the gameplay can be really fun on top of it. So
I completely understand the rating. I give it a 5.5.
All right.
I mean, I kind of want to say 6. Like, I think it deserves a 6. I just think, like, this is the kind of game that you design for a kid to sit down and enjoy, and this is not the kind of game where if I come home from the Blockbuster, and I'm sitting down and playing this as a kid, like, I'm going to be really frustrated really quickly.
I honestly have no idea what would be going through my head if I thought that I was going to make this video game. So I'm not sure whether or not I would necessarily say that it's for a kid to come home and enjoy.
Sure, that's fair.
Like, where
is it for an adult to go home and enjoy, though?
I mean, like, what was that design meeting? What, like, we're going to make a movie, or we're going to make a video game based on Hook.
I mean, Peter Pan. It's Peter Pan. I mean, what's wrong?
It's not Peter Pan, though. It's like, what if you let Robin Williams be Peter Pan? Okay, but we've got to rewrite the whole story because there's no way in hell anyone thinks he's Peter Pan. Oh, okay, he's really old Peter Pan who forgot about Peter Pan, and there's this guy named Rufio, and we yell his name a lot. Like,
yeah,
what is the video game meeting here?
Like, I mean, there's a band called Rufio. I don't. I need to go back and watch Hook. I'm too disconnected,
Isn't the
but
band called Rufio led by the guy who played Rufio?
I don't, I don't think so. But maybe that would be amazing. That'd also be
You
really,
can't
really
disprove it.
narcissistic.
You can't
That'd be
disprove it.
well, Google probably could, but that'd be very narcissistic.
You
You're
don't
like,
have the
this is the one
information
thing I've
available.
accomplished in life. I'm gonna name my band after myself.
You don't have the information available.
That's true. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I'd say 5.5. I think it's a good game. Honestly, if it had better controls, it'd be a 7. I mean, I think it's really seven's kind of just the ceiling for a 16-bit platformer. I feel like maybe an 8. Like it's just tough for me to say anything, you know, beyond. I mean, I guess I gave Mega Man X like a 9 or 10, and that's kind of a 16-bit platformer, but that's a bit
I think there's
different.
more to it.
Um, yeah. So, it's a good game. I would recommend if you're willing to put in the time to get used to the controls. I think the rest of the game's really cool, and I've always really enjoyed watching the speed run. So, let's go ahead and take a quick break. Speaking of said speed run, and then Chad can tell us about another game he's run.
All right, so talking a little bit about the speed run of Hook, this is one that's pretty near and dear to my heart because it's another one that I've run, but also one that I've taken really seriously over time. This is also one of the earlier games that I ever speed ran. I think that I bought a cart of this game around the same time that I started speedrunning on console, back when I switched over from emulator to console. So this is one of the earlier games I've ever
We call that
speedrun.
when Oth got saved.
Yeah, when Oth got saved, when Harry met Sally. So the world record for this game for a long time was about a mid 16. It was pretty much stuck there for a very long time until basically me and Lively Raccoon around the same time decided to start working on this game. I don't remember if I got the idea from him or he got the idea from me, but we
There
both,
was a renaissance of sorts.
there was a renaissance even.
It was a hot speed game for that
It was
for
an
that period of
absolute
time.
it was an absolute speed mess. World records were being set, PBs were being, made and lost. I think what
Most
actually
babies born 9 months after that period of time were actually named Hook, which I thought was weird.
that is amazing. So I think what actually spawned basically the remind or the return to this game was there was a little community of people. So at the time there was a streamer named High Five to Safety. He's changed his name to Slade now. But at the time there was a streamer named High Five to Safety, and he had picked up Hook. He was interested in speedrunning Hook, and a little band of his followers started doing the same thing. I don't know if they gave the idea to him or he gave the idea to
Isn't he a
them.
Mario Maker streamer?
Yeah, he speedran or he ran played Mario Maker pretty much
Yeah.
exclusively at the time. But anyway, he was starting to play Hook a lot, and there was like a bunch of people playing Hook, and I think that's what really brought me and Lively back into the game much later. Lively had done really great things with the game, and I had put it to rest. I think I had like a really bad like 1650 something at the time. And so, or 15 something. I had 1553, I think was my old PB. And so we came back to this game, a lot of innovation. So the world record as it stands right now, Lively Raccoon has a 1447. Slade, formerly High Five to Safety, has a 1450, and I have a 1455, which I'm going to brag for a moment, was actually the first ever sub 15. I pushed very hard to break the
I remember
barrier
that.
into 15. It was a stressful time for me. Actually, if you go back and watch my video, I actually had like on my stream it pointed to the time and it said this had better say sub 15. Um, it was
Oh, like you weren't looking at your splits.
oh yeah, I just needed it to be sub 15. That's all I cared
Yeah.
about. And so this game really saw a huge reawakening since it kind of got stuck around a 1530.
Random side thought. I just want to say that I think it's really funny that the Mario Maker community, it seems like every one of them finds very random speed game to get into, very random retro speed game. Like Jakku got really into Yonoid,
Hmm.
High Five got really into Hook, like Grand Pooh Bear's gotten really into Jaws. It's like there's something about them like not being involved in the retro speedrunning community, except they find one just incredibly obscure game, like in comparison to like the fact that they're huge streamers that you would think, oh well, they're gonna go run Super Metroid if they're gonna learn something or whatever. So I appreciate that about the
That's right.
Mario
Chat
Maker
chat
community.
reminded me it was actually all based on Three Cats Watching Top Gun, which is the name of a
Yes,
Twitch
I
streamer.
saw it 2 hour, two
Yeah.
hour and 8 minute time or something. I saw that
Yeah.
on the
Yeah, Three Cats Watching Top Gun speed ran the game and put his time on the board, and I think a whole bunch of High Five to Safety Slade fans said, we're going to beat that time. And so they did.
that's funny. And then he got a 1450.
Yeah. So this game has some pretty interesting speed tech. More or less, the majority of the game comes down to just conservation of momentum. So figuring out ways to preserve your speed as long as possible. That includes the fact that when you fly, you actually fly incredibly fast. And so timing out when to use your flight in order to overcome obstacles that might otherwise slow you down, to time it out so that you can maintain your speed at the right times.
You have to hold the run button to fly fast while you hold the B button. It's very
It's
weird.
it's very frustrating. Um, there's really minor speed tech that goes along with it. Things like, for instance, the run button is also the sword button. A very common thing for SNES games is that
Mhm.
the Y button is often used for both your attack and for running. And so it's you press the button down and you attack, and if you continue holding it, you'll start to run. Well, the thing about Hook is that when you press the Y button to attack, you're actually frozen in place and swing your sword. And so you can save a little bit of time, for instance, by like taking a step first so that you slide while you swing your sword. Or if you're really good and you want to do what the task does, you can actually very briefly pause at the very beginning of the level, hold down the Y button and unpause, and you'll never swing your sword, but you have to get really good at that. And
Is
there's
that why Lively does that in some of the end screens?
yeah, it
That's a
actually
question I was going to ask you.
yeah, you can actually only make some of the really good cycles by incorporating that pausing trick.
Interesting. I thought he was seeing what like RNG might have come into the room before he reacted to it, but that's really interesting. So he'll pause it, hold the Y button, and then be able to get somewhere that he wouldn't be able to because of the time it would take to swing his sword.
Yeah, the
Wow.
room in particular that comes to mind is there's this room where there's this guy that throws barrels at you, and if you do that trick, you can actually make it ahead of his barrels rather than having to wait on one of them or damage boost off of one of
I'm
them,
tired
things
of
like that.
video games depicting barrels as just things to throw at people. They have a
Yeah,
lot of uses.
yeah, barrels actually can be really good friends. I like that Donkey Kong Country treats them as friends, but every
That's
other game
true.
treats them as enemies,
You
so
could store bread in them just like your treasure chest.
you can also store friends in them, like in Donkey Kong Country. You can store your friend in a barrel. I don't think this is the
Maybe the
lesson we need to be
barrels were the
teaching our
friends.
children. Oh my god.
There is one really big clip in this run that saves a bunch of time as well, right?
Yeah, so you can clip through slopes. If you take damage while you're standing on a slope, sometimes if you're sub or no, I think we discovered it wasn't sub pixel values. It was actually based on the frame counter. You can clip through the slope, and so you can actually pause to like upset what frame you're on if you don't get it the first try, and hopefully get a better frame next time. But you can clip through slopes that way, and so you use that in a few levels to try to skip some obnoxious sections.
So it's
Um,
basically RNG for the player.
it's luck based for the player,
Yeah.
whether or not you get it. So a good run would definitely get it first or second try, something like that. But it can be very difficult. There's actually little pockets of really annoying RNG as well. Like for instance, the second boss is this
The
guy
tree
that
ball.
pops out of trees. So there's like these 6 holes in trees in this little boss room, and based on where you stand, you can usually get access to a lot of them. So at that point in the run, you've got this sword that fires a projectile, and if you stand in the right spots, you can have access to 5 out of the 6 holes in a reasonable amount of time. And so the world record strats would basically reset if you got a disadvantageous position. So you have to keep that in mind. It's actually really interesting. The speed run that I did way back in the day, I had just assumed, obviously it was the right answer to save the sword for as long as possible. It had a ranged attack on it that was really nice. But, as it's been rerouted and improved, it was basically discovered that the sword doesn't do all that much for you. In fact, it's way better to be able to damage boost almost constantly throughout the run. Because you lose the sword as soon as you take damage at any point. It gives it to you
Mhm.
at the end of stage 1, and if you ever take damage for any reason, you lose the sword. And
Like
so,
when you pick it up and try and pick it up over and over again, and you on level 3,
in where?
level 3.
Oh, there is
There's a
another
sword
sword
item
though.
that you can grab. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't
Oh,
grab it though because an enemy will always fall on your head.
I don't know if I've ever gone for that one, so I haven't experienced that
Yeah.
myself. But
I do
um,
remember the heavy reset point of this was the stupid tree boss though. Like
yeah,
this was get the
I
run to the tree boss and hope you can continue the run past the tree boss.
Yeah, I think I did the math at one point, assuming uniform randomness. You should be able to get through that boss in a reasonable amount of time, like 50% of the time. But unfortunately, as the time got more and more optimized, it turned out, well, some of the holes that he pops out of, actually, it's still slower to take those rather than just
Sure.
resetting. So it gets worse and worse.
How does
Um,
it feel saying considering uniform randomness while talking about Hook the video game?
this is my
Like
day-to-day
that,
life, man.
yeah, that this is your life.
This is just what I
You
talk
have
about.
such a powerful brain and it's been used for things.
I regret the way that I've applied my education to my life. It's I'm sure that I could be out there doing great things, but I have speedrun a 20-year-old platformer.
That's
So
good.
I guess that's going for me.
Yeah, I like it.
A lot of the bosses have pretty quick kills. For instance, the other RNG boss, the blimp boss in stage 4, it's not random what directions he moves. You can actually manipulate that to get some pretty quick kills on him. But he has like 3 holes on the blimp he can pop out of. And so which one of those he pops out of can make a huge difference in your time, or even whether you're able to hit him at all. And so that can be a huge reset point. The boss of the ice level, there's like very specific positions that you stand in to manipulate his attacks so that you can kill him as quickly as possible. Even the final boss, fighting Hook, on off of his ship when you fight him, you can really like time out to get these perfect hits on him if you know exactly how far he's going to walk and when you can swing your sword, because he'll like walk a few steps, and if you swing at any point in that, he'll block. But if you wait for him to like pull his hand back like he's going to attack you, you can swing right then and get him. So
Yeah, a lot of the bosses in this and Aladdin we didn't really point out, but you take a lot of intentional damage where you do the hit, you take damage so that you can kind of stand inside their inside their sprite with your iframes and then swing at them again. I know the first boss of this is like that. Some of the bosses in Aladdin are similar in that regard.
Yeah, the nice thing about the first boss is that he has the same sort of mechanic. When you fight Rufio the first time, he has this mechanic where
Oh,
uh,
that's Rufio.
when you swing your sword, if you're too early, he'll block your attack. But if you wait till he's about to attack you, then you can get the hit in. And so Lively Raccoon actually discovered that if you just take a hit on him, the amount of time it takes you to like stand back up is like the perfect amount of waiting time. And
Hmm.
so we take intentional damage on that boss, and then just like you can basically mash the attack button so that as soon as you're able to attack again, it's the right time.
But Rufio's a good guy. Why are we fighting Rufio?
Well,
Isn't he a good
Rufio
guy?
Rufio is the pan. He's the guy in charge, and so you have to fight him
Mm,
to claim the title of the pan.
the lore.
I know you really
I
have
need
to
to.
respect the lore
I
here.
gotta go. I regret not watching this film in preparation for this podcast. I made a
Well,
mistake.
you can make it your pocket episode.
Mm.
The only really additional thing that I would point out, a lot of the game is just like routing out how to preserve your momentum, routing out how to make the optimal jumps and things like the standard platformer fare. There is one jump, so I'm gonna set the scene for you. In stage 10, in the very last stage, there's this location where you're sort of jumping down to the bottom of the room, and then you're supposed to fly up to the top of the next room. And as you're flying up to the top of the next room, you see a door on the left hand side and you think to yourself, okay, that's where I'm supposed to go. But if you go in that door, it actually takes you back to a previous room. It's supposed to be a punishment. You go back to that room, you go back to a previous room, and you say, oh, I don't really want to be here. And if you go back through the door back the way you came, you're like encounter 3 enemies all at once who want to kill you. So it's supposed to be a punishment, like you took the wrong door, whatever. Well, it was actually it was in the task, and we discovered how to do it in real time. You can run across these spikes and abuse your iframes to run across the spikes, get just enough speed and jump at just the right time to jump through this door to actually skip a good portion of the room that you're in and a little bit of the next room as well. It loses some health, obviously, because you're running across spikes, and it's very challenging in the next room, especially if you're low on health, and it's kind of terrifying because you enter the room and there's 3 guys pointing guns at you like right at that moment. But if you can do that, it actually saves quite a lot of time. That was
Guns are bad.
Yes, that's
They
typically
can
how we
hurt
view
you.
guns.
Okay. Okay.
That was the major tech that beat my old world record back when it was 1553, and it was beaten by a runner named Economics at the time with a 1535. And then going forward, there were a lot more improvements made. Obviously, the run has seen huge improvements at this point. Now that it's sub 15 by 3 runners, there might be
Yeah.
more sub 15s. I don't know. I don't remember.
Awesome. Any other last thoughts about Hook?
I'd say that
It's a speed game.
I'm less likely to recommend this speed game to people than the other ones. Or than Aladdin. I think that this is a good speed game to learn, but it can be a little bit more challenging to get a good quality run.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, I think it's a lot of fun and definitely worth picking up.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching you grind this down a good bit. Also, shout outs to Lively. You can give him a follow. He's a really good speedrunner. He does. I know he did Bomberman 64 GDQ a while back, and does a bunch of other games. So,
Lively
um,
Raccoon is an absolute beast. You should follow
yeah,
him. He does Super
really,
Mario Brothers 2 as well. He does Bomberman 64. He does Hook. He
yeah.
does good things. Confirmed good things.
I'm sure we talked about him in the Bomberman 64 episode as well, but definitely worth watching. But yeah, this is a really fun speed game to watch for sure. I don't think it's the kind I would want to learn. I guess if I wanted to learn either of these 2 games, I would probably choose Hook actually, because I just don't think I could handle the mashing for Aladdin. But you could easily get a like the mashing in Aladdin doesn't save that much time. Like if you wanted to just get an okay time in Aladdin,
Right.
whereas this game takes some mastery to get used to the controls. Yeah, let's go ahead. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna answer your live Q&A.
All right, so we've picked a few of your questions and we want to answer them now. We really appreciate. So we're doing this episode. I don't know if we mentioned already, but we're doing this episode live on twitch.tv/the Frame Savers. So if you want to try to catch some of our live episodes, definitely give our Twitch channel a follow. We're trying to promote it. We're trying to use it more. So we're building up our base, building up our followers. Part of it is giving you guys an opportunity to listen to the episode as it's in progress and ask us questions that we will then answer at the end. We think that this is a nice format. And so the first question that we're going to answer is from Omega Number, who asks, many kids games seem like shovelware. Why are so many exceptions Disney titles?
So I have two thoughts on this. One is I think there's so many quality Disney video games because I think Disney is a very smart company and they don't, they're not going to let their license get just put on anything. So I think they're a bit pickier about stuff like that, just like Nintendo is much pickier about their IPs than other companies are. So I think that's a big reason for it, and they generally use pretty good developers for that. Like they used a lot of Capcom, and Capcom was really good then. The second side of that coin is I would say that there's probably more bad Disney video games than we think of. I think for some reason when it comes to the Disney games, because there's so many good ones specifically on the NES and SNES, that we forget that there's also a decent number of pretty bad ones.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of pretty mediocre. Like there's a Little Mermaid on the Genesis that's not very good. There's a Little Mermaid pinball for the Game Boy Color.
Pinocchio on the
There's this
SNES.
terrible Aladdin, or not terrible, but not very good Aladdin Game Boy game that we were talking about. Like a lot of the ones on Game Boy were actually pretty bad or mediocre. So I think it's a double sided coin. I think we remember them as being better than they probably were, and then also Disney's probably a little bit more careful.
Yeah, it's definitely quality control in large part. That's definitely a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think when you think of other licensed titles, like think of like a movie like Chicken Run or something, like they're not going to be as picky as Disney about getting their name on something. And that's why, for the GBA and the Game Boy Color, Wii and stuff, you have so much, kind of hot garbage, which is worse than cold garbage because it smells worse.
So Credge33 asks, Author Blues, are you going to try and go back for world record on Aladdin? Absolutely not. 88
That's what
asks,
I mean, no.
uh, are you threatened by Sky learning Aladdin for the 12-hour challenge and beating your time? No, I'm actually really excited that she's going to learn Aladdin for the 12-hour challenge because she watches runs of it religiously.
She's been talking about it a
I know.
lot.
And I'm going to be happy to see her put her money where her mouth is. I think she's
Yeah.
going to have fun doing it. And I think if she beats my time, she's going to really have earned it because while my time is not particularly great compared to like Joe D'Amelio, it is a really competent time.
Yeah.
So if she beats my time, she will have had to have put in the time to really earn that run. So
Yeah.
I'll
And
be
she's been
super
really
proud of her.
excited about learning it for some time, so it'll be really fun to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Cannon Bevco asks, is there any way to learn about how to hunt for glitches? The answer I have is ask Nick's report to hunt for the glitches.
So glitch hunting is a really complicated process. It is definitely good to have a wealth of information. So learning how to find information is really useful. Obviously, depending on things like task videos forums, looking up on YouTube the name of the video game plus glitch, because people love documenting wacky things that happen in games and then trying to figure out ways to actually make use of that. You can even go as deep as like the game facts forums, because people will post about weird things that happen to them in games. People are happy to talk about strange things that happen. So learning how to collect that information, and then on top of that, just playing a game so much that you understand how it works. When you start to understand sort of the quirky ways the game behaves, then you can sort of intuit how to use that against the game itself. And that's
Sure, like I think like Mega Man games, like people realize that like when you get stuck in a wall, it pushes you right always, and that's why people have been able to find so many zips. Like people play them a lot, they understand that mechanic, and so they say, well, if I want to get to the right really fast, I need to get in the wall, do this as often as I can. Where can I do that? Same
yeah.
with like Strider. Like if you watch that tutorial, oh, we found out how to clip into walls. Where would this be useful? But I think it does take a specific skill set, and probably just takes a certain amount of interest too. I think a lot more people are interested in doing the runs than finding the glitches. But the glitch hunting is so paramount, and I wish that the people who found the glitches got more credit than they do now. But
It takes a ton of patience, takes a ton of time, and honestly, speedrunning wouldn't be where it is if it weren't for the people who really devote the time to the actual glitch hunting. So it's
okay, an
really
incredibly amazing question by Third Lava Dolphin. If Abu and Tinkerbell were swapped, which would be the better game and which would be the better movie? I don't know enough about Hook the movie to know Tinkerbell's role. I know who Tinkerbell is. I think Abu is awesome. He's super cute. I don't really know what he does in the game. I don't know what either of them do in the game. Doesn't Tinkerbell make you fly? Is
yes.
she the one giving you the dust? So now I can fly in Aladdin? Well, that's got
Actually,
to become a better game,
that sounds
right?
kind of sweet.
Abu doesn't do anything in the game.
I want Abu in the Hook movie though, because then it would be a
Yeah,
real life monkey, and real life
yeah,
monkeys are awesome,
yeah. So I
right?
think Abu would make Hook a better movie, and Tinkerbell would make Aladdin a better game.
Wow, that it's amazing that we actually came to such an obvious answer for it too.
It's
It
sad
was
that we
so
made a
clear.
rational thinking through of this question.
I'm definitely not a 13 or a 30-year-old answering these sorts of questions.
Me neither. I'm 32.
Colonel Panic asks, can a speed game be ruined by discovery of difficult tricks, or is it generally a good thing to raise the skill ceiling with harder strats?
Oh, that's an interesting
I
question.
think most people would agree that there does come a certain point where tricks can ruin a run. I think it's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. You always want to be in favor of your game getting faster, but sometimes there are just tricks that are so frustrating, so random, so difficult to execute that it just starts to make the game a lot less fun. And that's usually one of the few reasons why I accept a division in categories. Whenever you end up with a category that has just become really not fun because of the addition of new discoveries, I don't think that anything should ever be across the board banned. I think that an any percent category should always allow anything it can. I think
Hmm.
that's an obvious answer. All things go. But I think it can be a stupid run. You know, it kind of reminds me of when we were talking to Zost about Super Metroid, the glitched any percent category. It's obviously faster than what the community calls any percent. Any percent is slower than the glitched any percent category, but as far as they're concerned, glitched any percent just isn't as fun to play.
Yeah.
So
I would say it's an interesting conversation for sure because there's the major ethos of speedrunning, like the whole ethic behind speedrunning is that doing a game as fast as possible is the best thing. Like that's the morality standard, right? Like speed is, what is good. But then also like there's an aspect I think that we push for maybe more than other people do in terms of our love of speedrunning is that accessibility is a super important aspect to speedrunning. And so I think difficult tricks are always good and raising the skill ceiling is always good, but yes, there's a certain point where people I feel like when like for certain runs that a skill ceiling is so high that like I just don't want to learn the game because it's like, well, I'll never be able to compete at a reasonable level because I can't, I don't want to pull this off. I think the same thing can happen for like really intense RNG based runs like a Final Fantasy 7 or certain speed games where it's like, well, if I want to compete for world record, I need to play this game 8 hours a day for the next 9 months because I need to get the luck. Like I need to get the combination of luck rolls that gives me the opportunity to do something that can also really kind of ruin the accessibility and the fun that goes behind the game for sure.
oh,
And
it
that
kind of
that does
reminds
I
me
mean that
of
factors into why I choose what games I choose.
It kind of reminds me of when I used to run Kiwi Craze. You know, that world record
Hmm.
was like 16 minutes long. It played through all the levels, and then someone discovered that the strategy that the task does, where there's this like frame perfect fluttering you can do, you could
Hmm.
skip almost the entire run, and it's down to 4 minutes. But the game just got a lot less fun to me.
Yeah,
I didn't find it as interesting because even if I could do it consistently, which at that point in time I was not a very good speedrunner, so I could not do it consistently. But
sure.
even if I could have, you skip all the fun parts of the game. So
I think it does also kind of attack this pride area in a lot of us speedrunners that I think we all need to work on, which is that like if I don't have a competitive top whatever time in a game, it's not worth learning, as opposed to like speedrunning's fun and I should learn games that I like. I think that's something I've been trying to push myself on more, which is like why I let myself learn Link to the Past. I know I'll never be competitive at Link to the Past. I know I'll never be a top 20 runner. But I'm really glad let myself learn to run it. But it is kind of hard to like look at your placing on speedrun.com and not be like a little butthurt, like, oh, I'm 107th in this game. So there's just definitely a lot of like psychological factors I think involved in that. That's a really great question.
So Andy J Retro asks the question that's on everyone's mind.
A hot question.
Asks, what do you guys think about the dragster decision from Twin Galaxies today? So
So from what I heard, oh, I guess why don't you explain the whole thing? I think you're going to probably articulate it better.
okay, so for those of you who don't know, the dragster decision,
We never did the dragster pocket we considered. It was
we
so
talked
hot,
about
and then
it.
it was like, well, now it's been like 3 weeks, and now it's not. So we're just
Yeah,
not.
we talked about doing a dragster episode, but we didn't do it. Ultimately, what ended up happening was uh, Todd Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Todd Rogers, he had a time that was credited on Twin Galaxies for years, on Guinness Book of World Records for years as a 551. That's the fastest that he had ever beaten the
It's
game.
like Guinness Book World Records too.
Well, Guinness Book of World Records pulls from Twin Galaxies, so I don't know if it ever appeared in their
Oh,
book,
interesting.
but
Okay.
anyway, they back it. So Todd Rogers had a 551 for the longest time, and it was actually discovered in the process of OmniGamer working on his speedrun science book, which is going to be available pretty soon, and I'll probably end up doing a pocket episode on it once I read it.
Now we got to
He
remember to promote that.
Yeah, he's writing a book about speedrunning called Speedrun Science. It's going to be fantastic. I've already read excerpts from it. It's great. So in the process of him writing the book, he was looking into old speedruns, historical speedruns that had some sort of significance, and he found this run and was unable to make the math work out. He actually broke down the game and figured out that based on his emulation of it, his basically reconstruction of the game, that the fastest time that was possible, not humanly, the fastest time that was just possible, was a 557, and so that didn't really work with the numbers. So anyway, for the longest time, OmniGamer was trying to provide conclusive evidence to show that Todd Rogers' time wasn't actually possible. And they dug their heels in, said, there's things that you're not considering. Could have been a fluke with the hardware. It could have been any number of things that caused it. We believe that Todd Rogers is right. And this has gone on for, at this point, upwards of a year. It got kind of sad for a while because watching a whole bunch of people come behind and basically definitively prove that it wasn't possible and they still stuck by Todd Rogers, it got pretty complicated. Todd Rogers actually has a ton of world records and a ton of games that are now, they were the part of the big dispute. Basically, times or scores that were not possible in any game, times that were not possible, not just not possible in a realistic sense, like it would take you 18 hours to do, which was the case with some of them, but some of the scores weren't actually achievable in the game. Like the score counter would never show that number. There was no configuration that would happen. So basically, after a lot of terrible publicity, after finally being faced with a bunch of conclusive evidence, and ultimately, and this is a piece of my answer to this question, what do I think about the dragster decision? The final nail in the coffin was when a former referee came along and said, I think he might have been lying. Finally, they said, okay, we're going to ban him from Twin Galaxies. All of his scores, all of his times are taken down. We're erasing him from history. And my response to it, what do I think about the dragster decision? I think it's really sad that despite the mountain of evidence stacked against him, despite basically 6 people individually verifying that his time wasn't possible, despite them contacting what's his name, Ben Heck, who basically deconstructed an Atari in an effort to show that what he did wasn't possible. Despite all this evidence, they dug their heels in and said, no, 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 you have no idea what you're talking about. And then finally, a referee coming along and saying, but maybe he was lying. They said, fine, that's good. We believe he was lying now. I think that it just shows how outdated, outmoded, and irrelevant Twin Galaxies really is.
Sure. I think, we normally avoid topics like this. I think it's easier to approach because it's kind of outside our community. Like I wouldn't approach this issue about like, people there's been stuff that's happened since we've done this podcast about people being caught cheating in the speedrunning community, blah blah blah. And we haven't like approached that, and that's not really something we normally delve into. I think this kind of reached like an interesting, again, like kind of an ethos thing between Twin Galaxies and speedrunning, and what's real, what's not real. I think I would have been willing to give Todd Rogers the benefit of the doubt that maybe he had some sort of faulty cart or some sort of, physical tilt, something like that in a game like this. But there was just so many different times of his and scores of his that were just so clearly ridiculous. For example, Centipede, I think he had 30 million points is what it said in second all time in Centipede, which is one of the most famous arcade games that's ever been made, was like 100,000. So we're saying that this person somehow was capable of getting like 300 times as many points as anybody has ever gotten. It makes no sense. That's not the way things like this work. And so I agree. I think it's the right decision. I think there was enough people working hard enough at this that I trust people like OmniGamer, that if it's not possible, it's not possible. I watched the insanity in fall upon Darbian as he chased the 557 and how hard it was to get that. So the idea that this guy could just get a 551 in a couple of attempts in front of what was it, Ubisoft or whatever, like it's just
Activision.
it's Activision. It's always been ridiculous. I think it's, it's tough to look back at stuff that, there was no photo evidence or video evidence of runs back then, or times and scores and stuff like that there is now. So a lot of that stuff is hearsay. So it's great that we live in an age where this stuff can get verified. We still have lots of issues in the speedrunning community with cheating. We have people splice videos. We have people, there's as people advance in the ability to beat games quickly, people also advance in the ability to pretend that they beat games quickly. There's been big things that have come out, like the world record holder for Super Meat Boy from a time ago came out and admitted that there was something fishy about their time. It's sad. It's sad to me that anybody would feel the need. I think it's sad enough that we do what we do, that it's really sad that someone feels a need to, for some reason, need validation in a way that they would lie about this stuff. But I think it's good that Twin Galaxies did finally do the right thing. I think it is telling of where Twin Galaxies is at, that I definitely did not expect that to be their decision. I thought their decision was going to be just to leave it all up there, even with all of the evidence. It's just like certain people, like you can give all the evidence in the world that something happened and they won't believe you.
I think the
I
ultimate
think it's a step in the right direction. I think that's good, but it is sad that it took this much work to prove something that was clearly scientifically impossible. Based on any amount of research or work. It's sad that people would be so easily able to believe somebody for lying, and it's just something to keep in mind, I guess. When I tend to be naive and too trusting, so yeah.
I think the big takeaway from the whole dragster thing was just that it's amazing that given the opportunity to do the right thing or do the wrong thing, keep the scores up or remove them, I think it's amazing that Twin Galaxies managed to find a way to somehow do the right thing and still look terrible doing it.
Yeah,
It's
I
just,
think the shocking thing to me is just how in the face of evidence, like clear evidence, like mounting mountains of evidence, that people will still believe whatever they want to believe in general.
yeah.
And that was the argument of so many people fighting for. It's not just like Todd Rogers was fighting the world in this one. It was lots and lots of people fighting on his behalf. And so I don't know, it's definitely interesting. I'm glad to hear that it's been resolved, and that, not that dragster matters per se, or at any of these times matter per se, but the truth coming out and the right thing being done is the best thing.
Right. So
uh
BD Weasel asks, do you get anxiety about all of your world records falling when you take a break from speedrunning to record a podcast? No, we do what we love. I'm okay. I accept all challengers. And many of my world records deserve to fall. All world records deserve to be beaten. So
yeah, that's a good point. I don't have one world record if good people ran the games. I mean, that's like, if the right person ran the game, I wouldn't. Um, I do. I mean, the podcast takes time for us, though, for sure. I mean, it's not just recording time, but it's planning time and time to, sit down and play games and stuff like that. So, I mean, it can definitely take away from the time that we get to put into speedrunning for sure. I don't have the mounting pile of world records that Auth has, so I don't get as much anxiety about it. But I've lost many of my world records in the last year or two, and it's actually pretty cool. It just shows that more people are speedrunning more often and more range of games. Like the amount of runs that are getting submitted. Also, just like the fact that we have a more unified source of where to find this stuff with speedrun.com, I think has helped because I think, like, for example, when I got my first quote unquote, what I thought was my first world record with Monster Party, like 4 years ago, it's because I beat the SDA time. I didn't realize somebody else was beating my time probably at the same time or maybe a week or two before after, we don't really know. But back then it was kind of just like if you beat SDA and whatever was on YouTube, you were good. So it's cool that that's available now. But that's my
Definitely.
random
And
rambling thought.
the last question we're going to try to cover is Space Cow asks, who would win in a fight, Peter Pan or Aladdin?
So this is interesting because Aladdin has a sword, right? We've decided, or does he
That's
not
not
have a
canon.
sword?
That's not
Or
canon.
does he just have apples? Doesn't he have a sword in the movies though at some point?
When?
I think he has a sword at some point.
Okay, let's accept that he has a sword. Go ahead.
And Peter Pan has like a dagger thing or
And he
kind
can
of a sword.
fly.
So but he can fly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Unless Tinkerbell's in Aladdin now, in which case now Aladdin can fly and Peter Pan can't.
That's true. That's not continuing in this question. I would say Aladdin because he's, when you're poor and you're growing up on the streets, like you learn how to rough it up.
Yeah, you're
Peter
scrappy.
Pan Peter Pan seems like the kind of guy who's like, lighting his cigars with $100 bills. I don't trust him in a
Wow.
fight. Yeah. He's probably getting manicures.
Back off, man.
I
I'm a
don't think he could
lawyer.
do it. And yeah, I saw what happened once he got hit. He gets hit once and all of a sudden he got his suit on and he's crying. I don't know. I'll take Aladdin.
All right. I would probably take Peter Pan. Peter Pan can fly. And I think honestly that's enough. Though
Aladdin's
I
got a
guess
good bod. He's got a
Aladdin's
ripped
got a
bod.
flying carpet. Never mind.
That's
I don't
true. He's got a
know.
ripped bod too.
I feel like here's what would happen is, okay, they would both fly up very high. They'd have a sword battle. They'd run each other through, fall to the ground. Both of them die. Murder suicide. It's perfect. It's beautiful.
Wow, that's the saddest ending to a podcast we've ever had, for sure. Murder suicide of two of our beloved cartoon characters. That kind of stuff happens. Okay. Any last thoughts about that?
I have nowhere to go but up from there, and
Yeah.
I refuse to do it.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for hanging out. We really appreciate the support. We've been enjoying doing these live episodes on twitch.tv/theframesavers. You can find us there. You can find links to all of our content at theframesavers.com. Reminder to Chad, we need to add the Twitch link on there, but all of our other links are on there for Twitter, Patreon, all of that stuff. Huge shout out to our Patreon contributors right now. That's the best way to support us. Maybe down the road we'll be able to get, affiliate or partner with Twitch and maybe be able to kind of transition support over to Twitch. But right now it's at patreon.com/theframesavers. We have people who give us $25 a month that we want to give a special shout out to. Tina Hacks, who was on our episode a few times ago. She's at twitch.tv/Tina Hacks. She does Shantae, Wonderboy, FF6. She was just recently doing Wonderboy at GDQ. She's a great speedrunner. Go follow her for sure. Mr. Pizak, who's a great speedrunner. He's been busy with his new Switch lately, but he does a lot of classic NES speedruns. He's MRPZAK on Twitch. We also have Kip. You can find him at twitch.tv/KIPP. He does Super Metroid speedruns. He's a fantastic Super Metroid speedrunner, is what it says here. He hosts a Super Metroid strat chat every Thursday on the stream. And he's inviting other top members of the community. People learn tricks in the game and stuff, so that's really cool. So he does that every Thursday. Also, our boy Space Cow, twitch.tv/spacecow2455. That's 2455. He does blind playthroughs of games, some speed runs, and some Crypt of the Necromancer racing. So I think that's like a roguelike.
Necrodancer.
Oh, is it
Kirk of the
really supposed to be
Necrodancer.
Necrodancer? That's like a roguelike?
That's the name of the game.
I think, right?
It's a rhythm based roguelike. Also, huge thanks to Space Cow. Space Cow has been absolutely phenomenal helping us organize our live Q&A during the episode. So as you ask questions in chat, Space Cow has been really, really excellent about putting them all into our show notes so that we can thumb through them at the end and figure out which of them we want to answer and which of them we want to laugh at when we're not recording.
Absolutely. I also want to give a shout out to the Warp World podcast. That's Grand Pooh Bear's podcast. He was on for all of our GDQ recaps. They're kind of they're good friends of ours, and we just want to give them a shout out more often. You can find them at podcast.warp.world, I think. Warp.podcast.world. I don't know. Google Warp World podcast. podcast.warp.world. They do a bunch of like Twitch news and video game news content. They're really awesome guys. Jakku, X Water, and Grand Pooh Bear. They do weekly episodes, so go check them out. They're a great podcast. Where can they find you, Chad?
You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at Author Blues. I am absolutely making the moves. I'm putting out the videos. I'm showing what I'm capable of, and
Ooh,
I'm doing the speed run. So
ooh.
that's where you'll want to be. You'll want to see me making the moves. How about you? Where can they find you?
Can find me on Twitter and Twitch at John Carls and YouTube at John Carls1, where I will slowly be descending into madness playing Mega Man 2 on Game Boy and just not happy ever again. So, also a huge shout out to B Morgs, Brian Morgenthaler. You can find him at B Morgs TV on Twitter and Twitch. He's our producer. He makes all these podcasts sound awesome. As always, we just really love your feedback. If you can go ahead and check us out on like whatever podcast app you're listening to, even if you watch us live. If you can leave any feedback, or what do they call them, reviews,
Comments,
positive reviews.
reviews,
If you don't like us,
iTunes,
don't give
Stitcher.
us a review.
Yeah,
If you
don't
don't like us,
mention, tell no one about this if you
yeah,
didn't love it.
if you don't like us, just download and don't listen. Give us a download every
Oh my
week and
God.
don't listen. But no, thank you guys so much for all of your support. We really appreciate it. And yeah, that's about it. Definitely give us a follow here on Twitch. We're trying to do more regular content, and we've been enjoying it for sure. Any
Yeah, we're
last
getting the
thoughts?
phone calls, we're getting the emails. People are loving the live episodes. So definitely check us out. Twitch.tv/the Frame Savers. Tell Twitch that you want to see us get a subscription button because you wanna bop it. So
Definitely. Any last thoughts about Aladdin, Hook, Life, Todd Rogers, Aladdin, Jasmine?
I'm really excited for Twin Galaxies to go back to being irrelevant.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you in 2 weeks with Star Tropics, the game that you guys chose, that you guys wanted. The people have spoken. You'll get what you want. We're looking forward to it. See ya. Chad doesn't.